My name is Miranda. I'm 34 years old, and I work as a marketing executive in Boston. My husband Ethan and I spent 18 months planning and saving for our 5-year anniversary trip to Italy. Then my sister Heather, 36, dropped a bombshell. She expected me to cancel our $7,000 international trip with just 3 weeks' notice to babysit her 3 kids, Emma, 7, Noah, 5, and Lily, 2. When I refused, my entire family labeled me heartless and selfish for not understanding family priorities. Stay with me to hear how my simple boundary led to a shocking confrontation at my doorstep 2 months later. Where are you watching from today? Hit that like button and subscribe to join our community of boundary setters. I'd love to know if you've ever had to stand your ground with family. Now, let me take you back to where this all began. Ethan and I met during our sophomore year of college. We shared a literature class, and after 3 months of shy glances and accidental on-purpose study sessions at the campus coffee shop, he finally asked me out. We dated for 3 years before he proposed, and we've been married for 5 wonderful years. We're both dedicated professionals. I've worked my way up to marketing executive at a digital agency, while Ethan thrives as a software engineer at a tech startup. We're not wealthy by any means, but we're comfortable and deliberate with our finances. The Italy trip wasn't something we could casually afford. We specifically saved for 18 months, cutting back on restaurants, new clothes, and even skipping a friend's destination bachelor party to make it happen. Italy wasn't a random choice for our anniversary. During our junior year of college, we both participated in a study abroad program in Florence. On our last evening there, overlooking the Arno River at sunset, Ethan got down on one knee and asked me to marry him. We'd always dreamed of returning to celebrate a significant anniversary, retracing our steps through the cobblestone streets where we'd fallen deeper in love. Our preparation went beyond just financial planning. We took Italian language classes at the community center every Tuesday night for 6 months. We researched and booked special experiences, a private cooking class in Florence, a sunset boat tour in Venice, and tickets to the opera in Rome. We saved specifically to dine at Michelin-starred restaurants that would normally be well beyond our budget. This trip represented not just a vacation, but a meaningful pilgrimage to where our life together truly began. My relationship with my sister Heather has always been complicated. Growing up, she was viewed as the fragile golden child in our family. When she cried because I wouldn't let her use my art supplies, our parents would insist I share. When she wanted the front seat in the car that was my turn, I was told to be mature and let her have it. When she forgot her science project, our parents stayed up all night helping her while I was expected to handle my responsibilities independently. This pattern continued into our teenage years. I had to include her in my friend groups despite her being difficult and dramatic. I was expected to drive her everywhere after getting my license, even if it meant being late to my own activities. When we both applied to the same college, and I got a scholarship while she didn't, my parents asked if I would consider going somewhere else, so she wouldn't feel bad. In adulthood, the dynamic persisted. When Heather got engaged to Bradley after dating for only 6 months, everyone was ecstatic. When I expressed subtle concerns about their compatibility, I was chastised for jealousy. Their wedding consumed our family for a full year, with everyone expected to participate in endless pre-wedding events. I was maid of honor, which somehow translated to being her personal assistant for 12 months. Bradley, my brother-in-law, is pleasant enough but chronically disengaged. He travels frequently for his sales job, often leaving for days or weeks at a time. Even when home, he spends minimal time with the kids, claiming he needs to decompress after work while Heather manages everything. He's quick to agree with whatever Heather wants, perhaps to avoid conflict, which only reinforces her entitled behavior. Heather's parenting style can best be described as overwhelmed and underplanned. She had 3 children in 5 years, seemingly without considering the practical implications. Emma, the oldest at 7, is quiet and responsible, often tasked with helping with her younger siblings. Noah, 5, is high energy and requires constant supervision. Lily, just 2, is still in diapers and going through typical toddler tantrums. Heather constantly complains about being exhausted, but rarely implements systems that might make her life easier. Our parents, Eleanor and Richard, continue to enable Heather's behavior. They live about 20 minutes from her and are regularly called for emergency childcare, grocery delivery, or emotional support. When they try to establish any boundaries, Heather becomes teary and mentions how impossible things are, instantly dissolving their resolve. They've canceled their own plans countless times to accommodate her last-minute needs. The pattern of last-minute babysitting requests has directly affected my life numerous times. Last December, just 2 days before Christmas, Heather called claiming a Christmas shopping emergency because she hadn't started buying gifts. I ended up taking a sick day to watch the kids for 24 hours while she shopped. In March, she decided the day before that she needed a birthday weekend and asked me to take the kids for 3 days. I had to reschedule 2 important client meetings. In July, she texted on a Monday that she needed a mental health break and dropped the kids off for 5 days, affecting a project deadline that nearly cost me a promotion. Each time, I accommodated her because that's what family does, according to my parents. Each time, I promised myself I would establish better boundaries next time. Each time, the guilt and family pressure won out. The specific event that triggered our current conflict was her best friend Melissa's destination wedding in Cancun. Heather had known about this wedding for over a year. Melissa and Heather have been friends since high school, and Heather was to be a bridesmaid. Bradley was invited too, but apparently couldn't miss an important sales conference the same week. Instead of arranging childcare months in advance, Heather texted me exactly 3 weeks before our departure date for Italy. "Hey sis. Need a huge favor. Can you watch the kids, October 12th to 19th? Melissa's wedding in Cancun and Brad has a conference. The kids are super excited for Andy Miranda time. Thanks." The casual tone, the assumption of agreement, and the emotional manipulation by mentioning the kids' excitement all triggered something in me. For the first time, I replied with a firm but polite decline. "Sorry, Heather. Ethan and I will be in Italy for our anniversary that week. We've been planning this trip for over a year. I can help you look for a professional sitter if you'd like." I even offered alternatives. I researched reputable nanny services in her area and sent links. I reached out to our cousin Jennifer, who loves children and might be available. I suggested she ask her in-laws, who live only an hour away and rarely see the grandchildren. I was trying to be helpful while maintaining my boundary. Little did I know this simple no would escalate into a family crisis of epic proportions. Heather's response to my text came almost instantly. "What do you mean you can't? This is Melissa's wedding. It's been planned forever. You can go to Italy anytime." I remained calm. "We've already paid for flights, accommodations, and special tours. Everything is non-refundable. This trip is really important to us. I'm happy to help you find alternatives, though." Her messages escalated quickly. "I can't believe you're choosing a vacation over family. The kids will be heartbroken. Do you know how hard it is for me to get away? This is literally the first trip without kids in years." "I understand it's important," I replied, "but so is our anniversary trip that we've planned and saved for. I've sent you some childcare options that might work." "Whatever. I'll figure it out myself, since clearly you don't care about helping family." Her final text was followed by silence, which I knew from experience was the calm before the storm. Sure enough, my phone rang that evening. Heather was in tears, her voice wavering dramatically as she detailed how devastating my refusal was. "I never get to do anything for myself," she sobbed. "Do you know how exhausting it is to be a mother of 3? When's the last time I got to go anywhere? And the one time I ask for help, my own sister abandons me." I tried explaining the significance of returning to Italy where Ethan proposed, how we'd been saving specifically for this milestone, how we'd already invested thousands of non-refundable dollars. She dismissed it entirely. "It's just an anniversary," she scoffed. "You'll have plenty more. You can go next year. This is Melissa's only wedding." When I pointed out that this was actually Melissa's second wedding, she hung up on me. The family involvement cascade began within hours. My mother called first, her tone artificially patient, as if speaking to a stubborn child. Miranda, sweetie, I think you need to reconsider this Italy trip. Your sister really needs you right now. When I stood firm, she switched tactics. I raised you to put family first. I'm very disappointed in your selfishness right now. Sometimes we make sacrifices for the people we love. My father called next, skipping pleasantries entirely. Miranda, this nonsense has got to stop. Your mother is upset, your sister is crying, and you're causing problems for everyone. Just reschedule the trip and help your sister. When I tried to explain our perspective, he interrupted with, marriage is about compromise. If Ethan was a good husband, he'd understand family obligations. The extended family recruitment was next. Aunt Patricia texted, just heard about the situation with Heather. Really hope you'll support your sister during this important time. Cousin Jennifer, who I'd suggested as a potential babysitter, messaged, families need to stick together during important events. Maybe think about what's really important here. The following Sunday, we had our regular monthly family dinner at my parents' house. The tension was palpable from the moment we arrived. My mother barely hugged me, my father gave Ethan an unusually firm handshake, and Heather wouldn't make eye contact. Throughout dinner, there were pointed comments. When I mentioned a work challenge, my mother said, well, at least you don't have 3 children to worry about. When Ethan mentioned a friend's recent vacation, my father muttered, some people prioritize vacations over family obligations. After dessert, my mother suggested we have a family discussion in the living room. As we settled into our seats, I felt like I was facing a firing squad. My parents sat across from us, with Heather in the armchair, already dabbing at invisible tears with a tissue. We need to resolve this situation, my mother began. Heather needs support for Melissa's wedding, and Miranda, you and Ethan need to understand that family comes first. My father jumped in. Marriage means supporting your wife's family. Ethan, surely you understand the importance of helping out when needed. Ethan, bless him, spoke up calmly. We completely understand family support, but this trip represents a significant milestone for us. We've been planning it for over a year and invested a lot financially and emotionally. There are other childcare options available. That's easy for you to say. Heather sniffled dramatically. You don't know what it's like to be responsible for 3 young children. I never get a break. I never ask for anything. The one time I need help. That's not entirely accurate, I interjected, feeling a surge of confidence. I've watched the kids multiple times this year alone, often with little notice. I've rearranged work commitments and personal plans repeatedly. Oh, so now you're keeping score? My mother's voice rose sharply. That's what family does, Miranda. We help each other without conditions or scorekeeping. The conversation grew increasingly heated. My father lectured about family loyalty. My mother alternated between guilt-inducing sighs and sharp rebukes. Heather's theatrical crying intensified whenever attention shifted away from her. The breaking point came when my mother shook her head and said, I just don't understand how you became so heartless. We didn't raise you to be this selfish. That word, heartless, struck like a physical blow. In that moment, I saw with perfect clarity the lifelong pattern of inequity and emotional manipulation. I stood up, surprising everyone. I am not heartless for maintaining a simple boundary, I said, my voice steadier than I felt inside. I'm not selfish for honoring a commitment to my husband and our marriage. What's selfish is expecting someone to cancel an expensive, meaningful trip because you failed to plan childcare for an event you've known about for a year. I turned to Heather directly. I love your children, and I'm happy to help when I can. But this pattern of last-minute emergencies has to stop. You knew about this wedding for months. You knew Bradley often has conflicts. You chose not to arrange childcare until 3 weeks before, and now you're making that everyone else's emergency. Heather's face transformed from theatrical sadness to genuine shock. My parents sat stunned. I took Ethan's hand and continued, we're going to Italy as planned. I've already sent several viable childcare options. I'm happy to help interview sitters before we leave. But I won't be canceling our anniversary trip. We left shortly after, ignoring my mother's tearful accusations and my father's stern warnings about regrets. In the car, Ethan held my trembling hand as I processed what had just happened. "Are we wrong?" I whispered. "Am I being selfish?" "Absolutely not," he assured me. "Healthy families respect boundaries. Healthy families don't demand sacrifices from only certain members. You stood up not just for our trip, but for balance in your family relationships." I nodded, feeling simultaneously liberated and terrified. "They're not going to let this go easily." "Probably not," he agreed. "But we'll handle whatever comes next together." I had no idea then just how dramatic whatever comes next would prove to be. The last week before our departure was a barrage of emotional warfare. My phone buzzed constantly with messages designed to break my resolve. My mother texted daily variations of, "I've never been so disappointed. I raised you better than this. I can't sleep thinking about your poor sister. What will I tell people when they ask why you weren't there for family?" Heather's approach was more dramatic. "Thanks for ruining Melissa's wedding for me. The kids keep asking why Auntie Miranda doesn't love them anymore. I'll remember this next time you need something. Brad's family thinks I'm making this up because they can't believe a sister would be so uncaring." My father's messages were fewer but stern. "Your behavior is unacceptable. This isn't how we raised you. A vacation is temporary, but family damage lasts forever." The day before our departure, my parents showed up unannounced at our condo. My mother's eyes were puffy from what appeared to be strategic crying, while my father wore his serious business expression. "We need to talk sense into you before it's too late," my mother announced as they pushed past me into the living room. "Your sister is devastated. She might have to miss her best friend's wedding because of your stubbornness. There are multiple childcare options available," I reminded them. "I've sent several recommendations for professional services, suggested family members who might help, and even offered to help interview sitters before we leave." "That's not the same as family," my father countered. "Those people are strangers. Your sister trusts you with her children. The children barely know Bradley's parents either, since he never takes them to visit," my mother added. "And we can't do it because your father's back has been acting up." This was the first I'd heard of any back problems. The conversation grew, increasingly heated. When my mother suggested we just postpone Italy until next year, Ethan finally intervened. "With all due respect," he said firmly, "we're not changing our plans. We've invested thousands of dollars and over a year of planning. We're celebrating our marriage, which should also be important to you as family." My parents exchanged looks of disbelief, clearly unaccustomed to such direct opposition. They left shortly after, my mother pausing dramatically at the door to deliver her parting shot. "You'll regret this decision. Family remembers who shows up when it matters." Departure day brought a mixture of anxiety and excitement. I checked my phone compulsively before boarding, half expecting some new family emergency designed to stop us. Ethan gently took my phone at the gate. "For the next 10 days, he said, let's focus on us. Whatever's happening back home will still be there when we return. They're adults who will figure it out." As our plane lifted off, I felt a weight lifting too. For the first time in weeks, I could breathe without the pressure of family disapproval constricting my chest. Arriving in Rome was surreal. The ancient city welcomed us with warm autumn sunshine and the intoxicating scent of espresso and fresh bread. Our first evening, dining at a tiny trattoria tucked down a cobblestone alley, I found myself checking my phone between courses, 5 missed calls, and a dozen text messages. What if there's a real emergency? I worried aloud. "If there's a genuine emergency, they'll call the hotel," Ethan reasoned. "Let's silence the family notifications for now. We can check once a day, but not let it consume our trip." I agreed reluctantly, creating a separate notification setting for family contacts. The decision proved liberating. Florence embraced us with artistic splendor and culinary delights. We visited the Uffizi Gallery hand in hand, marveling at Botticelli's Birth of Venus, just as we had during our study abroad program. We took a cooking class, laughing as we attempted to master pasta from scratch. We climbed to the top of the Duomo, breathless from both exertion and the spectacular view. Each evening, I performed my ritual check of family messages. They ranged from guilt-inducing to passively threatening, but nothing constituted an actual emergency. I responded to none of them. In Venice, we celebrated our actual anniversary with dinner at a restaurant overlooking the Grand Canal. As gondolas glided by in the moonlight, Ethan raised his glass of Prosecco. To 5 years with my best friend and partner, he toasted. And to many more years of supporting each other's boundaries and dreams. Over a decadent tiramisu, we had a deep conversation about family dynamics. Ethan's family, while not perfect, operated with mutual respect. His parents never demanded his siblings drop everything for last-minute requests. They planned family gatherings with consideration for everyone's schedules. They celebrated each other's personal milestones alongside family events. "Your family loves you," he said gently, "but they've developed unhealthy patterns. Your sister learned she could get her way through dramatics. Your parents learned to prioritize temporary peace over fairness. And you learned that your needs matter less than keeping others happy." I felt tears welling up, not from sadness, but recognition. "I don't want to lose them," I admitted. "But I can't keep being the only one who sacrifices." "Setting boundaries isn't about rejection," he assured me. "It's about teaching people how to treat you. Some will adapt. Others might not. But you deserve relationships based on mutual respect, not obligation and guilt." That conversation became the emotional centerpiece of our trip. As we explored Venetian canals, sampled gelato flavors, and admired ancient architecture, I felt a growing certainty that I'd made the right decision. Our marriage deserved this celebration. My mental health needed this boundary. Still, as our return flight approached, dread crept back in. What fresh drama awaited us at home? How would I handle the inevitable confrontation? The answer came sooner than expected. Our mailbox overflowed with passive-aggressive notes from my mother, detailing the family crisis I'd caused. My voicemail contained messages ranging from Heather's tearful recriminations to my father's stern lectures. Through the grapevine of mutual friends, I learned that Heather had ultimately hired an expensive last-minute nanny service, allowing her to attend the wedding. Her social media was filled with beach photos and wedding festivities, interspersed with vague posts about learning who's really there for you, and some people choosing vacations over family. The toxicity was overwhelming. After a day of sorting through the accumulated communications, I made a decision. I needed space, not forever, but enough to regain perspective and emotional equilibrium. I sent a brief, clear email to my parents and sister. "I need some time and space to process recent events. I love you all, but the pressure, guilt, and manipulation around our anniversary trip have been hurtful and excessive. I'll be taking a 2-month break from family contact to focus on my well-being. Please respect this boundary. I'll reach out when I'm ready to reconnect." Then I set up email filters, muted family text threads, and blocked social media notifications. I informed extended family members I trusted about the situation, not to recruit allies but to prevent misunderstandings. The silence began, not as punishment but as protection for my peace, my marriage, and ultimately for the possibility of healthier family relationships in the future. The first week of silence was the hardest. I'd wake up reaching for my phone, half expecting to check family messages before remembering my boundary. Guilt gnawed at me. Was I being cruel? Overreacting? Would this irreparably damage our relationships? Simultaneously, I felt a novel sense of relief. The constant pressure had lifted. The perpetual background anxiety of wondering when Heather's next emergency would disrupt my life had vanished. My shoulders unclenched. The stress-induced headaches that had become my constant companion faded away. Of course, my family didn't simply respect my clearly stated boundary. My mother showed up at my workplace unannounced 2 weeks into the silence, creating an awkward scene in the reception area. "I just need 5 minutes," she insisted tearfully to the uncomfortable receptionist. Fortunately, I was in a client meeting, and my colleague Vanessa intercepted her, explaining I was unavailable. Later, my mother left a voicemail claiming she'd been humiliated by being turned away from her own daughter's office. My father took a different approach, sending stern emails with subject lines like family loyalty and responsibilities of adulthood. Each message reinforced that I was the problem, that my behavior was unprecedented and disrespectful, and that the family was deeply wounded by my continued selfishness. Heather's strategy was more public. Her social media became a theater of martyrdom, with vague posts clearly designed for maximum sympathy, single parenting again while hubby travels for work. Some people don't understand how hard this is. Grateful for real family who show up when needed. She never named me directly, but mutual friends confirmed she was freely discussing my abandonment with anyone who would listen. Extended family members became unwitting messengers. Aunt Patricia called to just check in but quickly pivoted to how concerned everyone was about my situation. Uncle Robert texted that my parents seemed unusually upset and wondered if I'd consider extending an olive branch for family harmony. Throughout this challenging period, my support system proved invaluable. My friends validated that my boundary was reasonable and necessary. Ethan remained my steadfast ally, never once questioning our decision to prioritize our anniversary trip. He screened calls, helped draft responses to flying monkeys, and held me through moments of doubt. I also started therapy, something I'd considered for years but always dismissed as unnecessary. My therapist, Dr. Cantrell, helped me identify the unhealthy family patterns I'd normalized. She introduced concepts like emotional incest, when a parent relies on a child for emotional support, and parentification, when a child is forced to take on adult responsibilities, which illuminated my childhood experiences with painful clarity. A support group for adults navigating family boundary issues provided additional perspective. Hearing others' similar experiences reassured me I wasn't crazy or cruel for establishing limits. The group recommended books like Boundaries by Cloud and Townsend and Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents by Gibson, which became my nightly reading. Through social media monitoring by mutual friends, I learned about Heather's childcare situation. She'd ultimately borrowed money from our parents to hire a professional nanny service for the wedding week. Apparently, the cost was substantially higher due to the last-minute booking. She complained constantly about the expense online, despite posting lavish photos from Cancun, beachfront cocktails, spa treatments, and shopping excursions. Upon returning, she crafted an elaborate narrative about her sacrifice to attend the wedding. The financial strain, the worry about leaving her children with strangers, the stress of arranging everything, all by herself. The irony that she could have avoided much of this by planning ahead seemed lost on everyone, including herself. Several significant events occurred during my 2-month silence. My 35th birthday passed without contact from my family, the first time in my life without my mother's traditional morning call. Instead of feeling sad, I celebrated intimately with Ethan and close friends, enjoying freedom from family drama. At work, I received a promotion I'd been working toward for months. Without the constant interruptions of family emergencies and the emotional drain of navigating Heather's crises, I'd been able to focus fully on an important client project that caught executive attention. Thanksgiving approached, traditionally spent with my family. This year, we accepted an invitation to join Ethan's family in Connecticut instead. His parents welcomed us warmly, his siblings engaged us in conversations about our interests and accomplishments, and no one guilted anyone about anything. The contrast was illuminating. As Christmas loomed on the horizon, I sensed increasing pressure in the few family communications that reached me. Holiday traditions were being wielded as weapons of guilt. My mother sent a card with a pointed message about empty chairs at the family table. My father emailed about putting differences aside for the sake of the season. Throughout these 2 months, I experienced significant personal growth. My people-pleasing tendencies diminished not just with family, but in all relationships. I found myself setting appropriate boundaries at work, with friends, even with strangers. I slept better. My anxiety decreased. I made decisions more confidently, without the paralyzing worry about others' approval. The final weeks before the confrontation showed subtle signs of escalating family frustration. The tone of messages shifted from guilt-inducing to angry. The frequency of attempted contacts increased. Mutual friends reported my family seemed increasingly determined to break through my silence. I began preparing for eventual reconnection, working with my therapist to develop scripts for difficult conversations. I imagined different scenarios, practiced responses, and clarified my non-negotiable boundaries. I planned to reach out after the holidays, hoping the emotional intensity might diminish by then. What I never anticipated was that my family would take matters into their own hands in such a dramatic fashion. The Saturday morning that changed everything began peacefully enough. Ethan and I lounged in our pajamas, sipping coffee and planning a relaxing weekend. Maybe a movie that evening, Sunday brunch with friends, perhaps tackling the guest bedroom organization project we'd been postponing. The aggressive doorbell ringing shattered our tranquility. Not a casual ring, but repeated, insistent pressing accompanied by sharp knocking. Startled, I approached the door cautiously and peered through the peephole. My heart dropped. Standing on our doorstep were Heather, looking dramatically disheveled, and our parents, wearing identical expressions of grim determination. My mother clutched her purse like a weapon. My father stood with arms crossed. Heather held what appeared to be a manila folder. "It's my family," I whispered to Ethan, who had appeared behind me, concern etched on his face. "You don't have to open it if you're not ready," he reminded me. After a deep breath, I unlocked the door, but kept the security chain engaged, opening it just enough to speak through the gap. "This is unexpected," I said, aiming for calm despite my racing heart. "We need to talk," my father announced in his boardroom voice. "Remove this chain immediately." "We've respected your little timeout," my mother added, her tone brittle. "But this has gone on long enough." I closed the door briefly, exchanged a glance with Ethan, and removed the chain. As I reopened the door, my family pushed past me into our living room without waiting for an invitation. "2 months of ignoring your family," my mother began without preamble. "Do you have any idea what you've put us through?" I sent an email explaining I needed space. I reminded her. I was planning to reach out after the holidays. "How generous," Heather snapped, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Well, this couldn't wait." She thrust the manila folder toward me. "This is your fault, so you need to fix it." Confused, I opened the folder to find a stack of receipts and a typed invoice. The header read Professional Childcare Services with a total highlighted in yellow, $2,850. "What is this?" I asked, though I was beginning to understand. "That," Heather announced triumphantly, "is what your selfishness cost us. The professional childcare I had to hire last minute because you refused to help with the kids for Melissa's wedding." I stared at the itemized list in disbelief. The nanny service had charged premium rates for the last-minute booking, plus additional fees for evening hours and transportation. "You want me to pay for the childcare you arranged for your children?" I clarified. "Sure, I must be misunderstanding. This expense only existed because of you," my father explained, as if to a slow child. "If you had done your duty as an aunt and sister, this service wouldn't have been necessary." "We had to borrow money to cover it," my mother added. "With the holidays coming and 3 children to buy presents for, Heather can't possibly absorb this unexpected expense." Ethan had moved to stand beside me, his presence steadying. "Let me make sure I understand," he said, his calm voice contrasting with the charged atmosphere. "You're asking us to pay nearly $3,000 for childcare for children that aren't ours, for an event that wasn't ours, because we kept our anniversary plans?" "Plans can be changed," my mother said dismissively. "Family obligations can't." "This isn't a negotiation," my father added. "It's simple responsibility for the consequences of your actions." Heather's voice cracked with practiced emotion. "Do you know how hard it's been? The financial strain has been unbearable. We're still paying off the credit card bill. The kids' Christmas might be affected, all because you couldn't help for 1 week." The sheer audacity was breathtaking. I noticed our neighbor Mrs. Jenkins peering curiously through her kitchen window at the raised voices. Heather had shifted to theatrical sobbing, her volume increasing strategically. "Let's keep our voices down," I suggested, gesturing toward the window. "The neighbors can hear." "I don't care who hears," Heather's voice rose further. Everyone should know how you've treated your family. Your own sister. Your nieces and nephew. Something in me snapped. The weeks of guilt, the years of manipulation, the lifetime of uneven expectations, it all crystallized into perfect clarity. No, I said, my voice quiet but firm. I will not be paying this bill. The stunned silence was momentarily satisfying. Your sister needs help. My mother finally sputtered. My sister needs to plan childcare for her own children. I corrected. My sister needs to stop creating emergencies from foreseeable events. My sister needs to respect other people's time, money, and commitments. I turned to Heather directly. You knew about this wedding for over a year. You knew Bradley often has conflicts. You chose not to arrange childcare until 3 weeks before, then expected me to cancel an expensive international trip. When I refused, you guilt, manipulated, and recruited the entire family to pressure me. Now you want me to pay for a service for your children? Absolutely not. Heather's face flushed with anger. You've changed. You used to care about family. I still care about family, I replied. But I've realized healthy family relationships include respect, boundaries, and reciprocity. They don't demand sacrifice from only certain members. They don't punish people for prioritizing their marriages. And they certainly don't show up unannounced with invoices for other people's parental responsibilities. My parents exchanged shocked glances, clearly unprepared for this version of their typically compliant daughter. Ethan stepped forward. I think it's time for you to leave. Miranda has been clear about needing space, and this ambush isn't productive for anyone. We're not leaving until this is resolved, my father insisted. It is resolved, I said firmly. I'm not paying the bill. I'm not apologizing for keeping our anniversary plans. And I'm not accepting blame for Heather's lack of planning. My mother's face hardened. Is this what your marriage has done to you? Turned you against your own family? My marriage has shown me what healthy love and support look like, I countered. It's given me the courage to expect better from all my relationships, including family ones. Heather stormed toward the door, pausing for maximum dramatic effect. Don't expect to see the kids anytime soon. I won't expose them to someone who cares so little about family. My parents followed, my father issuing a parting ultimatum. This isn't over. That bill needs to be paid. You created this situation. As the door closed behind them, I heard Heather's voice raised for the benefit of any listening neighbors. I can't believe my own sister would do this to me. After everything I've been through. They lingered in the driveway for several minutes, perhaps expecting me to rush out with apologies or a checkbook. Eventually, they drove away, leaving nothing but tire marks on our driveway and emotional scars on my heart. The moment they left, my carefully maintained composure crumbled. I sank onto the couch, trembling with adrenaline and emotion. Ethan sat beside me, pulling me close as tears came. You did brilliantly, he murmured into my hair. I'm so proud of you for standing your ground. They hate me, I whispered. They actually hate me for not giving them exactly what they wanted. They don't hate you, he corrected gently. They're just facing the consequences of their behavior for perhaps the first time. It's uncomfortable for them, so they're lashing out. A soft knock at the door startled us both. Ethan answered to find Mrs. Jenkins, our kind elderly neighbor, holding a plate of cookies. I couldn't help overhearing, she said apologetically. Thought you might need these after such a difficult conversation. Family can be the hardest thing in the world sometimes. Her simple kindness broke through my remaining defenses. As Ethan thanked her, I wiped away tears, simultaneously heartbroken and strengthened by the realization that sometimes strangers show more empathy than blood relations. The confrontation had been painful beyond words, but it had also been clarifying. There was no going back to the old patterns now. Whatever came next would have to be different, better, healthier, more balanced. Whether my family could adapt to that reality remained to be seen. In the immediate aftermath of the doorstep confrontation, Ethan and I spent hours processing what had happened. We recorded everything while it was fresh in our minds, the demands, the accusations, the threats. Something about documenting it made it seem less overwhelming. transforming a chaotic emotional ambush into a comprehensible series of events. I called my therapist for an emergency session the following Monday. Dr. Cantrell helped me work through the tangle of emotions: anger at the audacity of their demand, grief for the family relationships I wished we had, fear about potential escalation, and underneath it all, a surprising thread of relief. The confrontation, while painful, had removed any doubt about whether I was overreacting. Their behavior had been so objectively unreasonable that it validated my boundary setting completely. With Dr. Cantrell's guidance, I developed a communication strategy. I would not respond immediately, allowing time for emotions to cool. When I did reach out, it would be with a comprehensive message to the entire family, clearly outlining both my perspective and my boundaries moving forward. A week after the confrontation, I sent the email. Dear Mom, Dad, and Heather, I'm writing to address what happened at my home last Saturday and to clarify my boundaries going forward. First, showing up unannounced at my home to demand money for childcare for Heather's children was inappropriate and unacceptable. I will not be paying this bill, as it represents Heather's parental responsibility, not mine. Second, the pattern of expecting me to rearrange my life for last-minute requests needs to end. I love my nieces and nephew, and I value family relationships, but these relationships must include mutual respect and consideration. Moving forward, these are my boundaries. 1. No unannounced visits to my home or workplace. Please call or text before coming over.
2.
I need at least 2 weeks' notice for any childcare requests, which I may accept or decline based on my own schedule and capacity. 3. No guilt tripping, silent treatment, or family recruitment when I set a boundary. 4. My marriage and commitments will be respected as valid priorities, not inconvenient obstacles to family demands. If these boundaries are violated, I will need to limit contact further to protect my well-being. I hope we can move toward healthier communication and mutual respect. I'm open to family mediation with a professional counselor if that would be helpful in rebuilding our relationship.
Love.
Miranda. I sent copies to several extended family members as well, not to triangulate, but to ensure my perspective was represented in the family narrative. The response was immediate and mixed. My mother texted a curt, "We received your email. We'll need time to process your accusations." My father didn't respond directly to me, but apparently called Ethan's father to complain about how I was breaking her mother's heart and how Ethan should talk some sense into me. Heather posted another vague social media message about toxic people who hide behind fancy words like boundaries when they're just being selfish. The surprise came from unexpected allies within the extended family. Cousin Jennifer called the next day. "I want you to know I support you," she said without preamble. Heather's been spinning this story to everyone, but showing up demanding money was completely out of line. Aunt Eleanor and Uncle Richard have always enabled her, but this crosses a line. Uncle Robert, my father's brother, emailed, "Got your message. For what it's worth, I disagree with how Richard and Eleanor are handling this. Boundaries are healthy. Stay strong." Gradually, I learned that many family members saw through the manipulation. Several had experienced Heather's entitlement themselves, but stayed quiet to keep the peace. My public boundary setting had created space for others to acknowledge the dysfunctional patterns. About 3 weeks after the confrontation, unexpected revelations emerged. Bradley, Heather's husband, called me directly, something he'd never done before. "I want to apologize," he said awkwardly. "I had no idea Heather was trying to make you cancel your anniversary trip. I didn't know about the confrontation at your house until after the fact. This has gotten completely out of hand." Through our conversation, I learned several shocking truths. Heather had exaggerated their financial hardship. They'd recently purchased a new SUV and were planning a spring break trip to Disney. The wedding expenses she complained about were largely optional additions: spa treatments, shopping excursions, and upgrading to a premium suite. Most surprisingly, my parents had already reimbursed her for most of the childcare costs. The demand for me to pay was purely punitive. "She was angry you didn't cave," Bradley admitted. "The money was secondary to making you feel bad." This information shifted something fundamental in my perspective. I wasn't dealing with desperate circumstances or genuine need, but with calculated emotional manipulation. 2 months after the confrontation, my mother sent a text that could generously be called a half apology. "I've been thinking about your email. While I still believe family should come first, perhaps we could have handled the childcare situation differently. I miss having you at family gatherings." My father followed with an email acknowledging that emotions ran high and approaching you at your home may have been misguided. He suggested a family meeting to clear the air and move forward for the sake of family unity. I responded carefully, expressing appreciation for their outreach while maintaining my boundaries. I agreed to a meeting, but with conditions. It would take place in a neutral location, with a professional mediator, and with clear agreements about respectful communication. Surprisingly, they agreed. A month later, we gathered at my therapist's office. My parents, Heather, Bradley, whose presence I'd requested, Ethan, and myself. Dr. Cantrell established ground rules. No interrupting, no personal attacks. Each person would have uninterrupted time to share their perspective. The session was challenging but productive. I expressed my hurt at being taken for granted and the pattern of uneven expectations. My parents reluctantly acknowledged their different standards for Heather and me. Heather struggled the most, alternating between defensive justifications and tearful accusations, but Bradley's presence tempered her most dramatic tendencies.
Dr.
Cantrell skillfully identified the unhealthy patterns. Heather's learned helplessness, my parents' enabling behavior, my overfunction ing to compensate, and the collective avoidance of direct communication in favor of emotional manipulation. The session didn't resolve everything, but it created a foundation for change. We agreed to monthly family dinners with clear start and end times. Childcare requests would be made in writing with at least 2 weeks' notice. My parents committed to encouraging Heather's independence rather than rushing to solve every problem. The changes weren't immediate or perfect. Heather initially tested boundaries frequently, forgetting the new agreements or creating fresh emergencies. My parents occasionally slipped into old patterns of pressure and guilt. But gradually, remarkably, things improved. Heather found a regular babysitter for date nights and a reliable backup for emergencies. My parents began setting appropriate boundaries themselves, no longer dropping everything for Heather's every whim. Most surprisingly, Bradley became more involved with childcare and family responsibilities, perhaps realizing he could no longer count on his in-laws and sister-in-law to pick up his slack. I developed a more balanced relationship with my nieces and nephew. Instead of emergency childcare, I scheduled regular aunt dates with each child individually. These planned, positive interactions proved more meaningful than the stressed emergency coverage of the past. The first family dinner after our mediated session was awkward but civil. The first holiday gathering, a scaled-down Easter lunch, included uncomfortable moments but no major dramas. When Heather made passive-aggressive comments, I calmly reminded her of our agreements rather than either ignoring the behavior or escalating the conflict. 6 months after the doorstep confrontation, I realized we had established a new normal. Not perfect, not always easy, but fundamentally healthier than before. My family hadn't transformed overnight into the idealized supportive unit I might have wished for, but they had adapted to respect my boundaries, sometimes grudgingly, sometimes genuinely. More importantly, I had changed. I no longer dissolved into guilt at the first sign of disapproval. I no longer anticipated everyone's needs at the expense of my own. I had learned to stand firmly in my worth and my right to balanced, respectful relationships. The journey hadn't been easy, but it had been necessary, not just for my anniversary trip, but for every aspect of my life moving forward. It's been exactly 1 year since that fateful doorstep confrontation, and sometimes I barely recognize my family dynamics compared to where we were. The transformation hasn't been effortless or complete, but the progress is undeniable. My relationship with Heather has found a healthier equilibrium. She still occasionally slips into her damsel-in-distress routine, but the frequency and intensity have diminished significantly. When she does make childcare requests, they come with proper notice and without the assumption of automatic agreement. More importantly, She's developed contingency plans rather than creating emergencies when her first option falls through. The most noticeable change is how she handles my declinations. A simple, "I'm sorry, I can't that weekend," is now met with "thanks for letting me know," rather than tears and accusations. The first time this happened, I was so shocked I called Ethan immediately afterward to share the miraculous development. My parents have gradually shifted their approach as well. My mother no longer calls with thinly veiled assignments disguised as questions. "You'll pick up Heather's cake for the party, right?" My father has stopped his lectures about family obligation whenever I prioritize my own needs. They've even begun occasionally saying no to Heather themselves, a development I never thought I'd witness. Holiday celebrations have transformed dramatically. Last Christmas, instead of the traditional 3-day marathon at my parents' house with Heather's children as the central focus, we had a single-day gathering with clear start and end times. Everyone contributed to the meal, activities were planned for the children, and most shockingly, my parents acknowledged my and Ethan's anniversary with a thoughtful gift and toast. My relationship with my nieces and nephew has deepened in unexpected ways. Before, I was primarily the emergency babysitter, arriving stressed to manage overwhelmed children. Now, our interactions are intentional and positive. I take Emma to art museums, exploring her budding interest in painting. Noah and I have a monthly Science Saturday where we conduct simple experiments. Little Lily and I have special reading sessions with voices for every character. Heather's growth journey has been the most surprising element of this year. After initial resistance and backsliding, she gradually began making changes. She enrolled in a parenting class through her church. She established a proper childcare network rather than relying solely on family. She even started therapy, though she frames it as life coaching to avoid the stigma she associates with counseling. There are still occasional relapses. During a family dinner 3 months ago, Heather attempted to volunteer me for a school fundraising committee without asking. When I declined, she made a pointed comment about how some people always have excuses. Instead of ignoring it or exploding, I calmly said, "I notice you're upset that I can't volunteer. What's that about for you?" Her surprise at this direct approach led to an actually productive conversation later. My parents' transformation has been more subtle, but equally significant. My mother has developed interests beyond micromanaging her daughters' lives. She joined a book club and recently took a watercolor class. My father, approaching retirement, has reconnected with old friends and hobbies. These external sources of fulfillment have reduced their obsessive focus on family dynamics as their sole purpose. Most importantly, they've developed a more balanced perspective on both daughters. My accomplishments and Ethan's are now acknowledged and celebrated rather than treated as distractions from family service. When I received another promotion this year, my parents hosted a small dinner in celebration, something previously reserved only for Heather's milestones. My personal growth has been the most profound aspect of this journey. The confidence I've developed in setting boundaries has extended far beyond family relationships. At work, I no longer take on colleagues' responsibilities out of guilt or people-pleasing. In friendships, I express my needs clearly rather than silently resenting when they're not met. Even with strangers, I've stopped the automatic self-sacrifice that once defined me. My marriage to Ethan has strengthened through this challenge. Navigating family conflict as a united team deepened our communication and trust. We've become more intentional about protecting our relationship from external pressures, scheduling regular date nights and quarterly weekend getaways to maintain our connection amid life's demands. Professionally, the boundary-setting skills I've developed have directly contributed to my career advancement. The energy previously consumed by family drama now fuels creative projects and leadership initiatives. My improved ability to address conflicts directly rather than avoid them has made me a more effective manager and colleague. The tools that proved most helpful throughout this journey included therapy techniques like gray rocking, providing minimal emotional response to manipulation attempts, and broken record, calmly repeating your position without defensive justification. Books on adult children of emotionally immature parents offered validation and practical strategies. Support groups, both in person and online, provided community during the most challenging periods. For anyone facing similar family dynamics, I offer these hard-won insights. First, recognize that manipulation tactics only work when you believe you deserve the guilt they create. Second, understand that setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's necessary for authentic relationships. Third, expect resistance when changing established patterns. People who benefited from your people-pleasing will naturally resist your empowerment. Finally, find support outside the family system. Perspective from unentangled observers is invaluable. The most profound lesson I've learned is that true family support flows in multiple directions. It doesn't demand sacrifice from some while entitling others to endless accommodation. It respects each member's individual journey, celebrates their milestones, and supports their growth without resentment. Healthy boundaries haven't diminished my family connections, they've enhanced them. By requiring mutual respect, I've created space for more authentic relationships. By refusing to enable dysfunctional patterns, I've contributed to everyone's growth. By prioritizing my marriage alongside family obligations, I've modeled balanced relationship commitments. Self-care isn't selfish. It's necessary. Like the airplane oxygen mask instructions, we must secure our own well-being before effectively supporting others. By reclaiming my right to prioritize my marriage, my career, and my mental health, I've become more, not less, present for the people I love. The journey continues, with occasional setbacks and new challenges. But the fundamental shift in both my family's behavior and my response to it has created a sustainable new reality. One where love doesn't require self-erasure, where support doesn't demand sacrifice, where family means mutual respect, not just shared DNA. Have you experienced similar family dynamics? How did you handle setting boundaries with loved ones? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please like and subscribe to join our community of boundary setters and self-respect warriors. Share this video with someone who might need validation in their own family journey. Thank you for witnessing my story, and remember, you deserve relationships that honor both your love for others and your love for yourself. I'm Harper Mitchell, 28, and I've always been the family disappointment despite my success. That day at my cousin's royal wedding, I never imagined my own father would publicly destroy me. The diamond necklace Nathaniel gave me, my most treasured possession, became the catalyst for my humiliation. "She's just the housemaid," my father screamed before ripping it from my neck, drawing blood as hundreds of aristocratic guests watched in shock. I never thought my own father would strip away my dignity in front of hundreds of guests. Before I continue my story, where are you watching from today? Hit that subscribe button and like this video if you've ever had family treat you like you weren't enough. Trust me, what happened next changed everything. Growing up in the Mitchell family meant one thing above all else. Appearances mattered more than anything, more than happiness, more than health, and certainly more than authentic relationships. My parents, Richard and Eleanor Mitchell, built their entire existence around climbing the social ladder, and my cousin Amelia was their golden standard for success. "Why can't you be more like Amelia?" became the soundtrack of my childhood. Amelia with her perfect grades, Amelia with her country club tennis trophies, Amelia with her ability to charm every adult in the room. Meanwhile, I was always the odd one out, preferring sketch pads to social gatherings, finding beauty in imperfection rather than striving for flawless presentation. The real trouble began when I turned 18 and announced I'd be attending art school instead of pursuing the business degree my father had mapped out for me since birth. The argument that followed left scars deeper than any physical wound could. Art? My father had scoffed, his face reddening with that familiar rage. "Artists are parasites, Harper. They contribute nothing to society and die penniless. No daughter of mine will throw her life away on childish doodles." I went anyway. That decision created the first major rift between us, a canyon that would only widen with time. What my parents never revealed to their precious social circle was that behind the facade of luxury cars and country club memberships, the Mitchell family finances were crumbling. My father's investment firm had taken several massive hits during the recession, but rather than scale back our lifestyle, my parents doubled down on appearances, mortgaging our future to maintain the illusion of prosperity. The strain showed in subtle ways. While Amelia received a brand new luxury car for her 16th birthday, I was given excuses. When the household staff was quietly reduced, I was expected to pick up the slack. Cooking, cleaning, and helping organize events while Amelia remained the pristine princess, never lifting a finger. It builds character, my mother would say as she handed me rubber gloves and cleaning supplies before their dinner parties. But I noticed Amelia's character never needed such development. For years ago, my life changed forever. I was working at a charity gala, not as a guest, but as part of the catering staff to make extra money for art supplies. That's where I met Nathaniel Pierce. He wasn't like the other wealthy attendees who looked through service workers as if they were invisible. When I accidentally spilled water on his custom tuxedo, I expected anger. Instead, he helped me clean up the other glasses I'd dropped. "I'm so sorry. I'll pay for the cleaning," I'd stammered, mortified. He'd smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. "It's just water. Though I'd love to know what distracted you so completely." The truth was I'd been sketching his profile on a napkin. When I reluctantly showed him, instead of being creeped out, he asked if he could keep it. We talked for hours after my shift ended. Nathaniel wasn't impressed by family names or social connections. He valued creativity, authenticity, and kindness. Our courtship was a whirlwind. Within 6 months, we were married in a private ceremony on a beach at sunrise. Just us, a justice of the peace, and 2 witnesses from among Nathaniel's most trusted friends. I didn't invite my family. The pain of potential rejection outweighed any fantasy of reconciliation. What my family didn't know, what I never bothered to tell them during our infrequent, strained phone calls, was exactly who Nathaniel Pierce was. As the founder of Pierce Technologies, he'd revolutionized renewable energy storage, making him not just wealthy, but influential on a global scale. His net worth had crossed into billions years ago, but you'd never know it from his humble demeanor and preference for privacy. "Money is just a tool," he'd tell me. "It's what you build with it that matters." On our first anniversary, Nathaniel gifted me a necklace that took my breath away, a simple yet elegant diamond pendant on a platinum chain. But its value wasn't in its price tag. "This contains the first diamond I ever purchased," he explained as he fastened it around my neck. "Before the company took off, before any success, I bought this small stone as a promise to myself that one day I'd build something meaningful. Now it's my promise to you that what we're building together means more to me than any business ever could." I wore that necklace every day for 3 years. It wasn't about flaunting wealth. It was a private reminder of love and believing in possibilities. When the invitation to Amelia's wedding arrived, my first instinct was to decline. She was marrying Sebastian Windsor, son of Lord William Windsor, distant relations to British aristocracy with old money and older prejudices. The event promised to be exactly the kind of superficial spectacle my parents worshipped and I'd grown to despise. "You should go," Nathaniel encouraged. "Not for them, but for yourself. Closure matters." He was right, as usual. Perhaps this was an opportunity to finally make peace with my past. Nathaniel planned to join me, but a last-minute crisis with a major sustainable energy project in Africa needed his personal attention. "I'll be there as soon as I can," he promised, kissing me goodbye at the airport. "Just a few hours behind you at most." I fingered my necklace nervously, my talisman of courage. "I'll be fine until then." How wrong I was. How catastrophically, humiliatingly wrong. The Windsor family estate in the English countryside looked like something from a period drama, sprawling gardens surrounding a genuine castle that had been in their family for generations. Stepping out of my taxi, I felt distinctly out of place despite my carefully chosen attire. I'd selected a forest green silk dress that complemented my eyes, elegant but not flashy, expensive but not ostentatious. The diamond necklace rested against my collarbone, my secret source of strength. Stone gargoyles seemed to judge me from their perches as I approached the massive oak doors. Footmen in formal livery directed guests through a grand entryway adorned with fresh floral arrangements that must have cost more than my first car. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across marble floors while a string quartet played softly in an adjacent room. "Name, please?" asked a tuxedoed attendant with a British accent so proper it seemed almost caricatured. "Harper Mitchell," I replied, then added, "the bride's cousin." His eyebrow arched slightly before he consulted his list. Yes, Mrs. Mitchell. You're seated in Section C for the ceremony." I didn't correct his assumption that I shared Nathaniel's last name. Pierce was indeed my legal name now, but explaining that would only invite questions I wasn't ready to answer. Inside, the ostentatious display of wealth was almost suffocating. Ice sculptures, rare orchids imported from Thailand, and champagne that flowed as freely as the Thames. My mother Eleanor spotted me first, her face performing that familiar transformation, initial shock, followed by a quick assessment of my appearance, culminating in a tight smile that never reached her eyes. "Harper," she said, air kissing near my cheeks. "You actually came. And alone?" No surprise there. Before I could respond, my Aunt Victoria materialized beside her, a vision in lavender taffeta that made her resemble an aging lilac. Well, Victoria drawled, "Our little artist has returned." "Love the dress, dear." "Department store?" "It's Valentino." "Actually," I replied, immediately hating myself for taking the bait. Victoria's eyes narrowed as she took in my appearance more carefully, lingering on my necklace. "That's quite a statement piece. Costume jewelry has come such a long way, hasn't it?" "It was a gift," I said simply, refusing to elaborate. My mother's gaze also fixed on the diamond. "You've done well for yourself, it seems. Finally found a proper job." "My gallery showing in Manhattan was quite successful," I answered, the half-truth bitter on my tongue. My art had indeed been featured in a prestigious gallery, but I hadn't mentioned that Nathaniel's connections had opened that door initially. My work had spoken for itself afterward. Eleanor's smile tightened further. "How creative. Well, don't let Amelia see you until after the photographs. She's been terribly stressed, and we wouldn't want to upset her with any surprises." The message was clear. I was a potential embarrassment to be managed, not family to be embraced. As they drifted away to greet more important guests, I caught a glimpse of the bride-to-be holding court across the room. Amelia looked stunning in what was clearly her pre-wedding outfit. Her actual gown would make its debut at the ceremony. Her golden hair was styled in an elaborate updo, her makeup flawless, her laugh practiced to musical perfection as she charmed a circle of admirers. Our eyes met briefly across the crowded room. Her smile faltered for just a second before she turned deliberately away, whispering something to her friend that caused both to glance back at me with barely concealed amusement. "Don't take it personally. She's been insufferable to everyone." I turned to find Rachel, my second cousin, standing beside me with 2 champagne flutes. She handed me one with a genuine smile that felt like finding water in a desert. "Rachel." "Thank God," a friendly face. I embraced her warmly. Rachel had always been kind to me, perhaps because as the daughter of the family's black sheep uncle, she understood what it meant to be perpetually judged and found wanting. "You look amazing," she said sincerely. "Life away from this circus clearly agrees with you." "I can't believe you're still sane after dealing with the wedding preparations," I replied. Rachel rolled her eyes. 3 changed color schemes, 5 different cake tastings, and 1 fired wedding planner later. Here we are. But enough about the bridezilla, tell me about you. That necklace is stunning. As Rachel and I caught up, I couldn't help overhearing fragments of nearby conversations, mostly gossip about the financial arrangements between the families. The words merger and bailout floated above discussions of the bride's dress and honeymoon plans. The Windsors are essentially buying a connection to American investors, an elderly woman in pearls whispered none too quietly to her companion. William's shipping business needs the liquidity that Richard can provide. And the Mitchells need the Windsor name to restore their credibility after that dreadful business with the SEC investigation, her friend replied. I nearly choked on my champagne. SEC investigation? My father's firm had always operated in a gray area ethically, but actual legal troubles were news to me. Across the room, I spotted my father engaged in conversation with an imposing silver-haired man who could only be Lord Windsor. Richard's body language was unusual, deferential, almost nervous, as he nodded repeatedly at whatever the older man was saying. My father was many things, but rarely submissive. Something was off. That's Sebastian's father, Rachel confirmed, following my gaze. Apparently, he's been questioning your father rather intensely about business credentials. The prenup negotiations were brutal. Before I could inquire further, my Uncle Maxwell approached, his considerable girth preceding him through the crowd. Harper, my dear girl, he boomed, embracing me with surprising warmth. What a vision you are! And what is this magnificent piece? His fingers reached toward my necklace before I could step back. Just a gift, Uncle Max, I deflected. Some gift, he whistled. Your young man must be doing quite well for himself. You must introduce us. His sudden interest in my personal life was suspicious. Maxwell had barely acknowledged my existence at family gatherings past, but now he was looking at me with calculating eyes that reminded me unervingly of my father's expression when assessing a potentially valuable business connection. As the guests began migrating toward the castle's private chapel for the ceremony, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd stepped into a performance where everyone knew their roles except me. And somehow, my necklace had become part of a script I hadn't read. The hour before the ceremony found guests mingling in the castle's grand gallery, surrounded by portraits of Windsor ancestors looking down their aristocratic noses at us. I steeled myself and approached Amelia, who was holding court among her bridesmaids in a corner adorned with white roses and baby's breath. Amelia, I said, offering a genuine smile. You look beautiful. Congratulations. My cousin turned, her expression momentarily unguarded, showing surprise that I'd actually approached her before her society mask slipped back into place. Harper, what a surprise. You clean up surprisingly decent when you try. Her gaze traveled from my carefully styled hair down to my shoes, assessing and dismissing in the same practiced sweep. Green was an interesting choice. Almost matches the staff uniforms. Her bridesmaids tittered on cue. I wanted to wish you happiness, I continued, refusing to take the bait. Sebastian seems lovely. He's perfect, Amelia agreed, her diamond engagement ring catching the light as she gestured. His family's estate makes our summer home look positively middle class. You should see their yacht. Just as I was about to excuse myself from this excruciating exchange, a deep voice with a British accent interrupted us. I don't believe we've met. I'm William Windsor, Sebastian's father. Lord Windsor was imposing up close, tall, silver-haired, with the perfect posture of someone who'd never questioned his place in the world. His handshake was firm, his assessment direct. Harper Mitchell, I replied. Amelia's cousin. Mitchell, he repeated, his gaze sharpening with interest. Richard's daughter? Yes, though we're not particularly close, I admitted. His eyes dropped to my necklace, and something changed in his expression. That's a remarkable piece. May I? Unlike my uncle, he waited for my nod before leaning closer to examine the diamond. Exceptional clarity. Single source, if I'm not mistaken. South African. I believe so, I answered, surprised by his expertise. The setting is distinctive. Reminds me of Pierce Designs. They do extraordinary work with ethically sourced stones. He straightened, looking at me with new interest. Are you acquainted with Nathaniel Pierce by any chance? Before I could respond, my mother materialized at my elbow, her fingers digging into my arm with warning pressure. Lord Windsor, I see you've met our Harper, she interjected, her voice unnaturally high. She's our artistic one. Works in, what is it now, dear? Graphic design. Fine art. Actually, I corrected. How fascinating, Lord Windsor replied, though his attention remained on my necklace. I was just admiring your daughter's remarkable pendant. It bears a striking resemblance to Nathaniel Pierce's early work. I have several pieces from his collection myself. My mother's grip tightened painfully. Harper has always had an eye for convincing reproductions. Lord Windsor's eyebrow arched. Indeed? It looks authentic to me. A commotion near the entrance spared me from having to respond. A man in his 60s entered, surrounded by several assistants, all clutching phones and tablets. Julian Blackwood, Lord Windsor explained, his tone cooling. Sebastian's godfather and a business associate. Excuse me, I should greet him. As he walked away, my mother rounded on me. Her smile vanished. What game are you playing? She hissed. That necklace? Where did you get it? You know your father's business depends on this connection. It was a gift, I repeated, extracting my arm from her grip. And I have no idea what you're talking about. Don't play innocent, Eleanor snapped. First you embarrass us by refusing to participate in the bridal preparations. Then you show up flaunting jewelry you couldn't possibly afford unless... She stopped abruptly, her eyes widening. Unless you've done something stupid. Tell me you haven't sold those ridiculous paintings to finance some counterfeit jewelry to upstage your cousin. The accusation was so absurd I almost laughed. You really think I'd go to such lengths to impress people who've never supported me? A flash of unease crossed my mother's face. Then how? Eleanor. Victoria interrupted, rushing over with undisguised panic. Julian Blackwood is here, and he's asking about Pierce Technologies' renewable energy contracts. My mother paled. Why would he? He saw Harper's necklace, Victoria whispered urgently. Lord Windsor pointed it out to him. Both women turned to me with identical expressions of suspicion and alarm. What have you done? Eleanor demanded. Before I could answer, Victoria deliberately bumped into a passing waiter, causing him to spill a full glass of red wine down the front of my dress. Oh! How clumsy! Victoria exclaimed with theatrical dismay. Harper, you poor thing. You'll need to clean up immediately. The ladies' room is just down that hall, far away from the pre-ceremony photographs, thank goodness. Stunned and dripping, I had no choice but to retreat, the expensive silk of my dress now ruined. In the bathroom, I did my best to salvage the situation with paper towels and cold water, fighting back tears of frustration. Just like old times, I muttered to my reflection. Always the family embarrassment. As I worked on the stain, the bathroom door opened and two women entered, engaged in hushed conversation. I recognized Victoria's friend Judith and one of Sebastian's aunts. They didn't notice me in the far corner. The entire Mitchell family is on the brink of financial collapse, Judith was saying. Richard's firm is under investigation for mismanagement of client funds. This marriage is their last hope. William knows, Sebastian's aunt replied. He's using Richard's desperation to secure extremely favorable terms for that shipping merger. The Mitchells will essentially work for the Windsors after today. And Sebastian? Does he love the girl at least? A dismissive laugh. He loves her family's connections to American investors. Love has nothing to do with arrangements at this level, darling. They continued into stalls, oblivious to my presence. My hands trembled as I pulled out my phone and texted Nathaniel, family in major financial trouble. Wedding is business arrangement. Everyone acting strange about my necklace. Missing you. His reply came seconds later, landing in 30 minutes. Stay safe. Love you. My stomach knotted with dread as I realized I'd stumbled into something far more complicated than family drama. This wasn't just about old resentments. It was about money, power, and desperate people with everything to lose. The wedding ceremony proceeded with all the pomp and spectacle befitting the merger. marriage of two supposedly prestigious families. Trumpet fanfares announced Amelia's entrance as she glided down the aisle in a gown with a train so long it required 3 attendants. Sebastian waited at the altar, handsome in his morning suit, though his smile seemed practiced rather than joyful. Despite being immediate family, I found myself seated in the back row, wedged between distant relatives who eyed my wine-stained dress with poorly concealed disdain. The stain had dried to an ugly brownish splotch despite my best efforts, making me look exactly like the disheveled family disappointment they'd always painted me to be. Lord Windsor gave a speech about family legacy and new beginnings that seemed innocuous until he made pointed reference to genuine success built on innovation rather than financial manipulation. His gaze swept meaningfully over my father, whose fixed smile never wavered even as his complexion reddened. More surprising was Lord Windsor's next comment. In business, as in marriage, integrity is paramount. We've had the privilege of working with true visionaries like Nathaniel Pierce, who understand that wealth without ethics is merely organized greed. The name drop sent a ripple of whispers through the assembly. My father's knuckles whitened around his prayer book, and my mother cast a suspicious glance in my direction. After the interminable ceremony came the reception in the castle's great hall. Round tables draped in white linen surrounded a dance floor, with the head table elevated on a dais. I found my name card at the table furthest from the bride and groom, beside the restrooms and kitchen entrance, a placement that couldn't possibly have been accidental. I'd barely touched my appetizer when Julian Blackwood approached, wine glass in hand. "You must be Harper Mitchell," he said without preamble. "Extraordinary necklace you're wearing. Pierce's Genesis design, isn't it?" I tried to acquire it several times, but Nathaniel was quite adamant it wasn't for sale at any price. Conversation at our table died as everyone strained to listen. "You know Nathaniel Pierce?" I asked carefully. "Competitor, you might say. Though he's several leagues ahead these days." Blackwood studied me with unconcealed curiosity. "What's your connection, if I may ask?" "That piece is extremely significant." Before I could formulate a response, my father materialized beside us, his expression thunderous beneath a brittle smile. "Julian, I see you've met my daughter. Harper was just about to help her mother with something, weren't you, dear?" Without waiting for my response, he gripped my elbow painfully and steered me away from the table toward a quiet alcove behind a massive floral arrangement. His fingers dug into my arm with bruising force. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he hissed, alcohol heavy on his breath. "I'm attending my cousin's wedding, which I was invited to," I replied, trying to maintain my composure. "Don't play games with me. That necklace? Where did you get it? Did you steal it? Or are you involved with Julian somehow, trying to sabotage me?" The accusation was so absurd I couldn't help but laugh, which only enraged him further. "You think this is funny? My entire future is on the line today. Lord Windsor is watching me like a hawk, Blackwood is circling like a vulture, and you show up flaunting a piece of jewelry worth more than you could earn in a decade." "It was a gift," I said for what felt like the 100th time. "From who?" he demanded, his voice rising. "What kind of game are you playing?" "No game, father. I'm married." The necklace was an anniversary present. He snorted in disbelief. "Married? To whom?" "Some starving artist who deals in forgeries." "You never bothered to ask about my life, so don't act offended that you don't know the details now." Something in my calm defiance seemed to push him over the edge. He grabbed my wrist and dragged me back toward the center of the reception, where speeches were about to begin. Guests turned to stare as we approached, sensing the spectacle unfolding. "Richard, what are you doing?" my mother hissed, rushing toward us. Exposing whatever con she's trying to pull, he snarled, then raised his voice to address the now silent room. "Lord Windsor, Mr. Blackwood, esteemed guests, I believe we have an imposter in our midst." Hundreds of eyes turned toward us. Amelia's expression flickered between confusion and delight at no longer being the center of attention. Sebastian looked merely annoyed at the interruption. "My daughter," Richard continued, his voice dripping with contempt, seems to have acquired jewelry she has no means to purchase. A Pierce original, I'm told. Quite valuable. Lord Windsor stepped forward, frowning. Richard, this hardly seems the appropriate. She's just the housemaid, my father screamed, his composure shattering completely. Always has been. Not good enough for university, not good enough for proper society, certainly not good enough to own something authentic. In one violent motion, he grabbed my necklace and yanked. The chain snapped, cutting into my skin before breaking. The diamond pendant fell into his palm as I stumbled backward, one hand flying to my bleeding neck. The room gasped collectively. Someone dropped a glass. My mother covered her mouth in shock, not at my father's actions, but at the public scene he was creating. Richard, Lord Windsor barked, stepping forward. Control yourself immediately. But my father was beyond reason, his face purple with rage and humiliation. This ends now. Security. This woman is attempting to defraud my family on my daughter's wedding day. Victoria rushed to his side. She's always been jealous of Amelia. We should have expected something like this. My mother joined them, forming a wall of rejection. Harper, how could you embarrass us this way? On today of all days. 2 security guards approached uncertainly, looking to Lord Windsor for confirmation. This is a family matter, Lord Windsor began, but my father cut him off. She's not family. Not anymore. Remove her from the premises immediately. The guards hesitated, then each took one of my arms. I could have fought, could have screamed the truth to the roomful of shocked aristocrats and social climbers. Instead, I straightened my spine, lifted my chin, and allowed them to escort me out with as much dignity as I could muster despite the tears streaming down my face. Wait, I said as we reached the exit. My purse and coat. We'll have someone bring them out, one guard replied, not unkindly. And then I was outside, the massive oak doors closing behind me with terrible finality. The English winter bit through my thin, stained dress. No coat, no phone, no money. Just the burning humiliation and the small trickle of blood drying on my neck where the necklace had torn my skin. I stood there shivering, watching my breath form clouds in the frigid air, and wondered how my father could possibly have thought I had anything left to lose. The castle courtyard was deserted, all guests and staff focused on the reception inside. Wind whipped through the formal gardens, sending dead leaves skittering across ancient cobblestones. I hugged myself for warmth, the thin silk of my dress offering little protection against the biting cold. How long would I have to wait? Minutes? Hours? Would anyone even remember to bring my belongings, or was I expected to simply disappear into the night, the family embarrassment conveniently erased from the picture-perfect wedding? A memory surfaced, being 8 years old, locked outside our vacation home, after spilling juice on Amelia's white dress. Think about what you've done, my mother had said through the door. I'd sat on the porch for 3 hours before the housekeeper took pity and let me in through the kitchen. Some patterns never change. I'd spent my entire life waiting outside, hoping for acceptance that never came. The cut on my neck stung in the cold air. My hand went instinctively to where the necklace should have been, feeling its absence like a phantom limb. It wasn't the monetary value I mourned, but the meaning behind it, Nathaniel's belief in possibilities, in me, in us. We create our own worth, he'd told me once. No one else gets to decide what you deserve. Standing there in the growing darkness, something shifted inside me. A lifetime of seeking approval from people incapable of giving it suddenly seemed like the most pointless endeavor imaginable. I had built a life filled with love, purpose, and authenticity, everything my family pretended to have but didn't. The side door creaked open, startling me from my thoughts. A young server, the same one who'd been carrying the tray when Victoria orchestrated my wine accident, stepped out cautiously. "Mrs. Pierce," he whispered, glancing over his shoulder. "I brought your coat. And this." He handed me my wool coat and, surprisingly, my clutch purse. "Thank you," I said, genuinely moved by this small kindness. How did you know my name? He looked sheepish. Everyone in the staff knows who you are now. Bit of an uproar inside after you left. He hesitated. Lord Windsor is properly furious with your father. Never seen the old man so worked up. I appreciate this, I said, slipping on the coat with relief. More than you know. He nodded awkwardly. Best get back before I'm missed. Good luck, ma'am. As the door closed behind him, I checked my clutch. Phone, wallet, passport, all there. I could call a taxi, flee to the nearest hotel, book the first flight home, and put this nightmare behind me. The sensible choice. Instead, I found a stone bench partially sheltered from the wind by an ancient yew hedge and sat down. Opening my phone, I found 3 missed calls and several texts from Nathaniel. Just landed. On my way. Driver says 20 minutes to the venue. Harper, are you okay? Please respond when you can. I typed quickly. I'm outside the main entrance. They took the necklace and threw me out. I'm okay, just cold and humiliated. His response was immediate. 5 minutes away. Stay put. True to his word, less than 5 minutes later, the quiet evening was interrupted by the sound of multiple vehicles approaching. 3 black SUVs with tinted windows pulled into the circular drive, moving with choreographed precision. Security personnel emerged from the first and last vehicles, 4 men in dark suits with earpieces and the hypervigilant posture of former military. The center SUV's door opened, and Nathaniel stepped out. My heart lurched at the sight of him, tall, imposing in his tailored overcoat, his normally kind face set in lines of controlled anger as he scanned the courtyard. When he spotted me, his expression softened instantly. Harper, he breathed, crossing the distance between us in long strides. I stood on shaky legs just as he reached me, and then his arms were around me, solid and warm and safe. I hadn't realized how thoroughly the evening had shattered my composure until that moment. I clung to him, trembling from more than just the cold. You're freezing, he murmured, pulling back to look at me. His eyes darkened when he noticed the small injury on my neck. One finger gently traced the mark. They did this to you? My father, I confirmed, the words still unbelievable even as I spoke them. He ripped off the necklace in front of everyone. Called me the housemaid. Had security throw me out. Something dangerous flashed in Nathaniel's eyes, a glimpse of the ruthless business acumen that had built his empire, usually hidden beneath his gentle demeanor. William Windsor called me directly after it happened, he said, guiding me toward the warmth of the waiting vehicle. He was appalled. Apparently, Julian Blackwood recognized the necklace immediately. It's quite famous in certain circles. Inside the SUV, the heated leather seats and privacy divider created a cocoon of safety. One of Nathaniel's security team handed me a thermos of hot tea, which I accepted gratefully. Carson, Nathaniel addressed the head of his security, please retrieve Mrs. Pierce's belongings from inside. And locate Mr. Richard Mitchell. I believe he has something that belongs to my wife. Yes, sir, Carson nodded, his expression suggesting he might enjoy this particular assignment. As 2 security members headed for the entrance, I placed my hand on Nathaniel's arm. What are you planning to do? First, ensure you're all right, he said, his voice gentle as he brushed a strand of hair from my face. Then retrieve your necklace. After that. His expression hardened. We have some choices to make. They're not worth it, I said quietly. Let's just go. Nathaniel studied me carefully. Is that what you truly want? To walk away? I considered the question seriously. For years, I'd tried to fade into the background of my family's drama to escape their toxicity through avoidance. Where had that gotten me? Still vulnerable to their cruelty, still carrying the weight of their rejection. No, I finally admitted. I'm tired of slinking away. I'm tired of being the family secret, the disappointment, the one who's never enough. For once, I want to stand my ground. A smile slowly spread across his face, proud, fierce, loving. Then that's exactly what we'll do. Carson returned surprisingly quickly. "Sir, Lord Windsor has requested you join him inside. He says, and I quote, 'This bloody circus has gone on long enough.'" Nathaniel turned to me. "Your call, love. We can leave right now or we can finish this." I took a deep breath, straightening my shoulders. The girl who had arrived alone hours earlier might have chosen escape. But sitting there with Nathaniel's unwavering support, I found a reservoir of strength I hadn't known I possessed. "Let's finish it," I decided. "But first, I need 5 minutes to fix my makeup and hair." Nathaniel's smile was worth every moment of humiliation I'd endured. "That's my girl." As I freshened up using the SUV's well-appointed vanity, Nathaniel briefed me on what Lord Windsor had told him. Apparently, after I'd been escorted out, William had demanded an explanation from my father. When Richard admitted he'd essentially accused his own daughter of theft and fraud, Lord Windsor had been disgusted. The situation deteriorated further when Julian Blackwood confirmed the necklace was indeed Nathaniel Pierce's Genesis diamond, a piece so significant in the jewelry world that attempting to sell a replica would be like trying to pass off a fake Mona Lisa. "Your father's still holding the necklace?" I asked, applying a fresh coat of lipstick with steady hands. "According to Windsor, yes. He refused to give it to anyone, insisting it must be counterfeit." I shook my head, marveling at my father's capacity for self-deception. He'd rather believe I'm a thief than accept I've succeeded without his help. Some people can't recognize genuine value unless it comes with external validation, Nathaniel said. "Ready?" I checked my reflection one last time. The wine stain on my dress was still visible, but my expression was transformed, no longer hurt or defensive, but resolute. "Ready." With Nathaniel's security team flanking us, we approached the castle entrance. This time, no one would make me wait outside. Our entrance into the Great Hall created exactly the effect you might expect when a billionaire and his security detail interrupt a high-society wedding reception. Conversation died mid-sentence. Champagne flutes paused halfway to parted lips. The string quartet faltered, then fell silent. Every eye in the room turned toward us. I spotted my family immediately. My father stood near the head table, my mother and aunt flanking him like sentries. The necklace dangled from his clenched fist. Amelia and Sebastian sat frozen in their ornate chairs, the bride's expression vacillating between outrage at the interrupted spotlight and fascination with the unfolding drama. Lord Windsor broke the silence, striding forward to greet us. "Nathaniel, about bloody time. This situation has become intolerable." They shook hands with the easy familiarity of old associates. My father's face drained of color as the implications registered. "You know each other," he stated flatly. "For over a decade," Lord Windsor confirmed. "Pierce Technologies handles the renewable energy systems for all our shipping operations. Most efficient in the business." Nathaniel's hand found the small of my back, a gesture of support that didn't go unnoticed by the watchful crowd. "William, thank you for calling me. I understand there's been an unfortunate misunderstanding regarding my wife." The word wife reverberated through the hall like a thunderclap. Gasps and whispers rippled across the assembly. My mother swayed slightly, gripping Victoria's arm for support. "Wife." Julian Blackwood stepped forward, looking between us with new interest. "Well, well." "The mysterious Mrs. Pierce. The business world has speculated about your identity for years." "Not so mysterious," I replied evenly. "Just private." My father found his voice at last, though it emerged strangled and uncertain. "This is absurd. You expect us to believe you married Nathaniel Pierce? The tech billionaire?" "I married an artist with an extraordinary vision for sustainable technology," I corrected him. His bank account was irrelevant. Nathaniel's smile held genuine amusement, though it did come in handy for purchasing your father's debt. This time, the gasps were audible throughout the room. Richard's face flushed an alarming shade of purple. "What are you talking about?" he demanded. "Perhaps we should discuss this privately," Lord Windsor suggested, glancing meaningfully at the fascinated wedding guests. No, I said firmly. I was humiliated publicly. We'll resolve this publicly. Nathaniel nodded his agreement. William, would you mind explaining the situation to Richard? He seems confused. Lord Windsor sighed, adjusting his cufflinks. Mitchell, when I began looking into your company's financials for our merger, I discovered numerous irregularities. Rather than expose them immediately, I consulted with Nathaniel, who expressed interest in acquiring your outstanding loans. Which I did through a series of holding companies. Nathaniel continued smoothly. Every mortgage, every business loan, every line of credit. As of last week, your primary creditor is effectively my wife. A strangled noise escaped my father's throat. Across the room, Amelia's perfect composure finally cracked, her mouth hanging open in undisguised shock. Sebastian rose from his seat at the head table. Father, what does this mean for our arrangement with the Mitchells? Lord Windsor's expression was grim. It means, son, that your new father-in-law neglected to mention he's functionally insolvent and under investigation by the Securities and Exchange Commission. The merger we discussed is worthless. The room erupted in shocked murmurs. My mother sank into a nearby chair, her social mask crumbling to reveal naked panic beneath. You did this, my father spat, taking a menacing step toward me. You orchestrated this whole thing to humiliate me. No, Richard, Nathaniel replied, his voice hardening. You managed that entirely on your own when you assaulted your daughter and stole her property. Speaking of which, he extended his hand expectantly. My father's fingers tightened around the necklace. This can't be real. She's never accomplished anything in her life. The casual cruelty of his dismissal still had the power to wound, but this time, I refused to show it. Instead, I stepped forward, directly facing the man whose approval I'd sought for so long. That necklace contains the first diamond Nathaniel ever purchased, I said, my voice clear and steady. Before his company existed, before his success, it represented his belief in possibilities. He gave it to me because he believed in me, in my art, in my voice, in my worth, long before any gallery did. Something you never managed to do. The Genesis diamond, Julian Blackwood interjected, unable to contain himself. Legendary in the industry. I've offered millions for it. It's not for sale, Nathaniel and I said in unison. Richard, Lord Windsor's voice carried a note of finality. Return Mrs. Pierce's property immediately. Trapped and cornered, my father had no choice. With trembling fingers, he held out the necklace. The platinum chain was broken, the settings slightly bent from his rough handling. I took it carefully, feeling its familiar weight in my palm. Thank you. Now what? Richard asked, defeat evident in his slumped shoulders. You've won. You've humiliated me in front of everyone. Are you going to destroy me completely? Call in the loans? Force bankruptcy? It was the question I'd been asking myself since learning of Nathaniel's acquisition of my family's debt. What did I want? Revenge? Justice? Or something else entirely? That depends on you, I said quietly. For years, I tried to earn your love by being someone I wasn't. I'm not doing that anymore. But I'm also not you. I don't need to destroy others to feel valuable. I glanced at Nathaniel, who nodded his support for whatever I decided. You have two choices, I continued. First option, we restructure your debt with favorable terms, giving you a chance to rebuild legitimately, ethically. In exchange, you seek therapy to address whatever broken part of you needs to demean others to feel powerful. My father blinked in disbelief. And the second option? We walk away. Permanently. No restructuring, no family connection, no more chances. The debt proceeds normally through standard channels, and whatever happens, happens. But you never contact me again. A heavy silence fell over the hall as everyone awaited his response. My mother finally approached, her expression uncharacteristically vulnerable. Harper, she began hesitantly. I don't understand. After everything that's happened, why would you offer to help? Because holding on to hate hurts me more than it hurts you, I replied simply. I'm choosing to break the cycle. From the corner of my eye, I noticed Amelia slipping away from the head table. She approached tentatively, the massive train of her wedding gown dragging behind her like the weight of unspoken history between us. I'm sorry, she whispered when she reached me, tears smudging her perfect makeup. I've always been horrible to you because I was jealous. Jealous? Of me. I couldn't hide my surprise. You had everything. Amelia shook her head. You had courage. You left and built something real. I'm just this. She gestured at her elaborate gown, the lavish reception. A transaction. The genuine pain in her eyes reminded me that gilded cages are still cages. Perhaps we had more in common than I'd realized. It's not too late to build something authentic, I told her, surprising myself with the sincerity of the sentiment. As Amelia and I shared this unexpected moment of connection, my father seemed to shrink before my eyes. Not the towering figure of my childhood fears, but simply a man whose ambition had outpaced his integrity. I need time to consider, he finally said. Take all the time you need, Nathaniel replied. Our offer expires at midnight. After that, business proceeds as usual. Lord Windsor cleared his throat. Now that this matter is temporarily resolved, perhaps we could allow the bride and groom to continue their celebration? Nathaniel, Harper, would you join us at the head table as my personal guests? The invitation, so pointed in its exclusion of my parents, was both olive branch and statement. A new alignment of power, publicly displayed. As we made our way across the room, guests parting before us like the Red Sea, I felt an unfamiliar lightness. For the first time in my life, I was neither seeking my family's approval nor running from their judgment. I was simply myself, Harper Pierce, standing in my truth. And that, I realized, was the greatest victory of all. The sleek interior of Nathaniel's car cocooned us in quiet as we left the Windsor estate behind. Through the tinted windows, I watched the castle's illuminated turrets recede into the distance, growing smaller until they were just pinpricks of light in the darkness. Symbolic, somehow. Are you okay? Nathaniel asked, his hand warm around mine. I considered the question carefully. The evening had been a roller coaster of humiliation, confrontation, and ultimately, liberation. My neck still bore the small cut from the necklace chain, and my emotions felt similarly raw and exposed. I think I will be, I answered honestly. It's strange, I spent so many years being afraid of their rejection, and now that I've experienced the worst they could do, I feel free. Nathaniel smiled, lifting my hand to press a kiss against my knuckles. You were magnificent in there. I'm so proud of you. I couldn't have done it without you. You absolutely could have, he corrected me gently. You're stronger than you know. But I'm glad you didn't have to. We rode in comfortable silence for a while, the English countryside rolling past our windows in shadowy contours. My thoughts drifted to the choice I'd offered my father. Had it been naive to extend an olive branch after such betrayal? Or was it the only way to truly break free of the cycle? Do you think he'll take the offer? I finally asked. Nathaniel considered this. Your father is a proud man. Pride has its uses, but it makes a terrible compass. My guess? Eleanor will convince him it's the sensible choice, but he'll never acknowledge what it cost him. Their approval doesn't matter anymore, I said, realizing the truth of it as the words left my mouth. It's just, they're still my family, as dysfunctional as we are. Family is complicated, Nathaniel agreed. But remember, it's also something we create for ourselves, not just something we're born into. A week later, those words would resonate even more deeply as I stood in the airy downtown space that would soon become the Harper Pierce Foundation for Young Artists. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the potential of the empty rooms. What do you think? I asked Rachel, who had flown in from London to help me conceptualize the space. My cousin, the only family member I'd remained in contact with after the wedding debacle, spun in a slow circle, taking it all in. It's perfect. Imagine all the kids who will find their voice here. The foundation had been my response to the wedding aftermath, a way to channel the painful experience into something positive. We would provide scholarships, mentorship, and exhibition opportunities to young artists from difficult family backgrounds. The pain of being told your passion is worthless? I could transform that into support for others facing the same struggle. Have you heard from them? Rachel asked carefully. I nodded. My mother called yesterday. First time in years, she's reached out rather than responding to my calls. The conversation had been awkward, stilted with unspoken emotions and fragile new boundaries. Eleanor had been uncharacteristically subdued, perhaps humbled by how quickly their carefully constructed social facade had crumbled. Richard agreed to the debt restructuring, I told Rachel. And apparently he's seeing a therapist, though Mother presented it as executive coaching to save his pride. Miracles never cease, Rachel remarked dryly. It's a start, I shrugged. I'm not expecting overnight transformation. Just maybe something healthier eventually. My phone buzzed with a text from Nathaniel. Package arrived. Home in 20. That evening, as the sun set over the Manhattan skyline visible from our penthouse windows, Nathaniel presented me with a small blue velvet box. What's this? I asked, though I had my suspicions. Open it, he encouraged with a smile. Inside lay my necklace, the Genesis diamond restored to its original glory. The platinum chain had been repaired, the setting repolished to its former brilliance. But there was something different, something new. Turn it over, Nathaniel suggested. On the back of the setting, a tiny inscription had been added, Strength rises from broken places. Tears welled in my eyes as Nathaniel fastened the necklace around my neck, its familiar weight settling against my collarbone once more. Perfect, he said, stepping back to admire it. I was so afraid I'd lost it forever, I admitted, touching the diamond gently. Some things are too precious to lose, he replied. They may get damaged, they may need repair, but their essential value remains. I knew he wasn't just talking about the necklace. That night, as we discussed plans for the Foundation's inaugural exhibition, our conversation turned to family, both the one we'd been born into and the one we were creating. I want our children to know their worth isn't determined by achievements or others' approval, I said, the words surfacing from a place of deep conviction. I want them to understand that failure isn't fatal and success isn't final. Nathaniel's eyes softened. They will, because they'll have you showing them every day what authentic strength looks like. In the months that followed, the foundation took shape, becoming a vibrant community hub. Rachel moved permanently to New York to help run it, bringing her warmth and empathy to young artists still finding their voice. My relationship with my parents remained complicated, but was evolving slowly towards something resembling mutual respect, if not the unconditional love I'd once craved. Most surprisingly, Amelia reached out regularly, her marriage to Sebastian having prompted some genuine soul-searching. Behind the perfect facade, she was discovering her own authentic voice. Tentatively exploring photography as more than just a society hobby. Our chosen family expanded too, friends, colleagues, and foundation students gathering regularly in our home for dinners that brimmed with laughter, creativity, and acceptance. The contrast with the sterile, judgmental gatherings of my childhood couldn't have been starker. The necklace remained my daily companion, its significance transformed. No longer just a symbol of Nathaniel's belief in me, it now represented my own journey, from seeking external validation to finding unshakable inner worth. Standing in your truth isn't always comfortable. Sometimes it means being escorted out of fancy weddings. Sometimes it means offering forgiveness that hasn't been earned. Always, it means choosing authenticity over approval. But the freedom on the other side? That's worth every difficult step of the journey. Have you ever had to stand up to family who didn't support your dreams? How did you find the courage to be true to yourself despite others' expectations? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and share this video with someone who might need to hear that their worth isn't determined by others' opinions. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, your value was never up for debate in the first place. I never thought my own mother would try to steal my business. The company I built from nothing, working 80-hour weeks while she told me I was wasting my time. The same business she now believed my half-brother deserved to control, despite him never working a day in his life. When they showed up with legal papers demanding I sign over 51% ownership, I knew I had to make the hardest decision of my life. What followed revealed a truth so shocking, it changed everything. Before I dive into this wild story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. If my journey of standing up against family betrayal resonates with you, hit that like button and subscribe to join our community of survivors. Trust me, the ending of this story will leave you speechless. My name is Audrey, and at 30 years old, I've built a tech consulting business valued at $2.5 million. But success didn't come easy, nor did it come with family support. In fact, my journey began with a childhood marked by emotional neglect and constant comparison. My mother, Pamela, remarried when I was 14, bringing Raymond and his traditional values into our home. From day one, the dynamic shifted. While I had once been the center of my mother's world, her attention quickly diverted to building the perfect family with Raymond. They had my half-brother Connor 2 years into their marriage, and from that moment on, I became an afterthought. Connor needs more attention. He's just a baby, my mother would say when I asked for help with school projects. As the years passed, that excuse evolved. Connor needs these expensive soccer lessons, or Connor deserves this vacation. Meanwhile, I worked part-time jobs throughout high school just to afford college application fees. When I announced my plan to major in computer science, my mother rolled her eyes. "Such a waste of your time. Computers are for men," she said dismissively. Raymond nodded in agreement while Connor, then just 8 years old, was praised for simply knowing how to turn on a tablet. College was a struggle financially. My scholarship covered tuition, but I worked 3 jobs to pay for housing and food. My roommate Lauren would often find me asleep at my desk, exhausted from balancing work and studies. Meanwhile, my social media feed showed my mother and Raymond proudly announcing their plan to fully fund Connor's education at any school he chose. After graduation, while my classmates took jobs at established firms, I had a different vision. I'd identified a gap in the market for specialized tech consulting for small businesses that couldn't afford enterprise-level services. My professors thought I was crazy. Get experience first, they advised. But I knew my idea had potential. I started my company in my tiny studio apartment, using a secondhand laptop and working from my kitchen counter. For the first year, I continued bartending on weekends to make rent while building my client base during the week. Each small success was met with indifference from my family. "When are you going to get a real job?" my mother would ask during our increasingly rare phone calls. "Connor's thinking about pre-med. Now, that's a respectable career." The irony came 3 years later, when my business began to truly flourish. Suddenly, my mother started mentioning me to her friends. "My daughter, the entrepreneur," she'd say, as if she'd supported me all along. Raymond began asking pointed questions about my revenue and client contracts during holiday dinners. I answered vaguely, uncomfortable with their newfound interest in my finances. Then Connor dropped out of college after his freshman year. "School isn't for everyone," my mother said defensively, the same woman who had criticized my every academic choice. The double standard was glaring, but not surprising. As my company grew to a team of 15 and moved into proper office space, the family dynamics shifted again. My mother started calling more frequently, often mentioning financial struggles or unexpected bills. At first, I helped out of a desire for her approval that I'd never outgrown. "A few thousand for car repairs here, covering Connor's apartment security, deposit there." But the requests increased in both frequency and amount. And then Victor entered the picture, my mother's new boyfriend after her divorce from Raymond. Tall, charming, and always dressed in expensive suits that seemed just slightly beyond what a regional sales manager should afford, Victor took an immediate interest in me. Not personally, but professionally. So tell me about this little business of yours, he asked within minutes of our first meeting, his eyes calculating something behind his smile. I've always had a knack for spotting potential. I didn't think much of it then. But looking back, that was when everything began to change. The casual questions about my company structure, the impromptu suggestions about family businesses, and the way he encouraged Connor to learn from his successful sister. All of it was setting the stage for what was to come. If only I'd recognized the red flags sooner. The shift in my family's attitude toward me was gradual, but unmistakable. What began as occasional requests for financial help evolved into something more persistent and entitled. My mother's calls now always included some mention of money. Her car needed repairs, the roof was leaking, or Victor's temporary business setback required a short-term loan. Just until next month, she'd promise. But next month would come and go with no mention of repayment, only a new crisis requiring my assistance. When I gently brought up the previous loan, she'd look hurt. I didn't realize you were keeping score, Audrey. That's not what family does. Victor became a constant presence in these conversations, often taking the phone from my mother to explain in business-like terms why this latest request was both urgent and sound. Think of it as investing in your family, he'd say with that smooth confidence that made me increasingly uneasy. Then came the suggestion that caught me off guard. During a Sunday dinner at their house, Victor casually mentioned that Connor was between opportunities and needed direction. Your brother has such potential, Victor said, swirling his wine. He just needs the right mentor. Connor, now 22, looked up from his phone with sudden interest. My mother beamed at me expectantly. Have you ever thought about bringing him into your business? Victor continued. Family companies have certain advantages, tax-wise. I nearly choked on my water. Connor had never expressed the slightest interest in technology or business. His brief college career had included 3 major changes before he dropped out, citing the restrictive academic environment. I don't know, I said carefully. The tech field requires specific skills and education. You could teach him, my mother interrupted. That's what big sisters do. Looking at Connor's suddenly hopeful expression, I felt cornered. After years of seeking my family's approval, here they were finally seeing value in what I'd built, but only as an opportunity for Connor. Against my better judgment, I agreed to let Connor shadow me for a few weeks. Just to see if it's a good fit, I qualified. From day one, it was a disaster. Connor arrived at the office an hour late, dressed as if for a nightclub rather than a professional environment. He spent meetings texting, asked inappropriate personal questions to my female employees, and showed zero interest in learning the basics I tried to teach him. Lauren, now my operations manager and closest friend, pulled me aside after Connor's first week. This isn't working, Audrey. The team is uncomfortable, and he's disrupting our workflow. I knew she was right, but the thought of disappointing my mother again made my stomach knot. Just a few more days, I promised. That Friday, I overheard Connor talking to a client on the phone. Yeah, I'll probably be running this place soon. My sister's just keeping the seat warm, he laughed. I stood frozen in the hallway, unable to believe what I was hearing. When I confronted him later, he shrugged it off. Just joking around. Victor says I need to project confidence in the business world. The mention of Victor sent a chill through me. What exactly was he telling Connor? That question was answered the following week at another family dinner. After my mother served dessert, Victor cleared his throat. Connor has been telling us about his experience at your company, Audrey. Connor nodded eagerly. I've been learning a lot. We think it's time to formalize his position, Victor continued. A real title, equity stake, that sort of thing. I set down my fork, stunned. He's been shadowing me for less than 2 weeks. He has no experience or qualifications. But he has potential, my mother interjected. And he's family. My business isn't a family charity, I said, struggling to keep my voice even. It supports 15 employees and their families. I can't just hand out executive positions. Victor's smile didn't reach his eyes. No one's suggesting charity. We're talking about making room for family in your success. Success that, frankly, You seem reluctant to share. The accusation stung. I'd been sharing my success, thousands of dollars in loans that we all knew would never be repaid. After dinner, my mother followed me to my car. Connor needs this opportunity, Audrey. His father never provided for his future like he should have. And that's somehow my responsibility? I asked. We're family, she said, as if that explained everything. You need to make room for your brother. After everything we've done for you. I drove home in a daze, trying to recall exactly what they had done for me. The memories that came were of missed school events, dismissive comments about my career choice, and years of emotional neglect while Connor received every advantage. For the first time, I began to question whether maintaining this relationship was worth the cost to my mental health and business. But I wasn't prepared for how quickly things would escalate from uncomfortable to threatening. 3 days after the tense family dinner, my receptionist Melissa called my office line. Audrey, your mother is here with 2 men. They don't have an appointment, but they're insisting on seeing you immediately. I glanced at my calendar, packed with client meetings and team check-ins. Tell them I'm booked solid today. I can meet tomorrow afternoon. 5 minutes later, my office door burst open. Victor strode in confidently, followed by my mother and Connor. Victor carried a leather portfolio under his arm with an air of self-importance that made my skin crawl. This couldn't wait, Victor said, closing the door behind them while ignoring my shocked expression. Family business is priority business. I stood up, already feeling the defensive walls rising. I'm in the middle of preparing for a client presentation. We need to reschedule. This won't take long, Victor replied, opening his portfolio and spreading several official-looking documents across my desk. We've taken the liberty of drafting the necessary paperwork. I looked down at the papers, my confusion turning to disbelief as I scanned the text. The document was titled Family Business Restructuring Agreement and outlined a new ownership structure for my company, with Connor receiving 51% controlling interest. What is this? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Victor smiled, placing a gold pen on top of the papers. The future of your family business. Connor will assume the role of CEO, with you transitioning to Chief Technology Officer. Your expertise with a technical side, his fresh vision for growth. It's the perfect partnership. I looked at Connor, who was examining his reflection in my office window rather than meeting my eyes. Then to my mother, whose expression held an unsettling mixture of determination and avoidance. This is insane, I said, pushing the papers away. This company is 100% mine. I built it from nothing. Connor has no experience, no education in this field, and has shown zero aptitude during his time here. He's family, my mother finally spoke. And family takes care of each other. By stealing my company? I asked incredulously. Victor's smile hardened. No one's stealing anything. We're restructuring to benefit everyone. Connor needs a future, and frankly, Audrey, you could use the help. The work-life balance of a solo entrepreneur isn't sustainable. I laughed without humor. So, this is for my benefit? Taking my company away is helping me? You're being dramatic, my mother sighed. No one's taking anything away. You'll still be involved. As a minority shareholder in my own company, I was nearly shouting now, aware that my glass-walled office made this humiliating scene visible to my employees. Victor leaned forward, his voice dropping to a menacing tone. I've been doing some research into your early contracts, Audrey. There are some irregularities that could cause problems if they came to light. Tax authorities tend to ask uncomfortable questions. My blood ran cold. He was threatening me. There were no irregularities. I'd been meticulous from day one, working with reputable accountants and attorneys to ensure everything was above board. But the threat itself was enough to reveal his true character. You don't know what you're talking about, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. Maybe not, Victor shrugged. But allegations alone can damage our reputation. Clients get nervous, start looking elsewhere. These things have a way of spiraling. My mother placed her hand on mine. Honey, we're just trying to secure Connor's future. You've done so well for yourself. It's time to help your brother now. I pulled my hand away. By giving him what I've spent years building? What about his responsibility to build something for himself, like I did? Not everyone is like you, she said dismissively. Connor needs this opportunity. I'm ready to take over. Connor finally spoke, straightening his posture in a poor imitation of confidence. I've got big ideas for the company. You don't even know what we do, I replied flatly. Computers and stuff, he waved vaguely. The point is, I know how to delegate. Through the glass walls, I could see Lauren watching with concern, other employees whispering among themselves. This public spectacle was damaging regardless of the outcome. You have 48 hours to sign the papers, Victor announced, gathering the documents back into his portfolio, but leaving a copy on my desk. After that, we'll need to explore other options to resolve this situation. As they turned to leave, my mother paused at the door. This is the right thing, Audrey. You owe us. The words hit me like a physical blow. Owe them? After years of emotional neglect, undermining my choices, and only showing interest once my business became successful? When the door closed behind them, I sank into my chair, hands shaking with a mixture of rage and disbelief. Through the glass, I saw my team pretending to work while stealing concerned glances my way. The humiliation burned almost as much as the betrayal. My phone buzzed with a text from Lauren. You okay? Need backup. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I stared at the papers they'd left, the audacity of their demand still not fully registering. This wasn't just about money or business. This was about control, about rewriting the narrative of my life to make my achievements community property, while my struggles had been mine alone. For the first time, I saw my mother and her relationship with Connor with complete clarity. This wasn't love, it was something more dysfunctional, and I was done being the victim of it. Sleep eluded me that night. I paced my apartment, replaying the confrontation in my office, examining years of interactions with my mother through this new, painful lens. Had she always seen me as a resource rather than a daughter? The mounting evidence suggested yes. At 2 a.m., I called Margaret, my attorney. Despite the hour, she answered on the third ring. This better be good, Audrey, she grumbled, sleep heavy in her voice. My family is trying to take my company, I blurted out, then proceeded to explain the entire situation, from Connor's internship to Victor's thinly veiled threats. By the end of my explanation, Margaret was fully awake. First, take a breath. These documents have absolutely no legal standing without your consent. Your company is registered solely in your name, with clear documentation of your ownership from day one. But Victor mentioned irregularities in my early contracts. A fishing expedition, Margaret interrupted. If there were actual issues, he would have specified them. He's bluffing, hoping you'll cave under vague threats. Her confidence steadied me. So, what do? Document everything. If they've put threats in writing, save them. Forward me that paperwork they left. And tomorrow, we implement security measures at your office. By 8 a.m., I was at the office implementing Margaret's recommendations. I met with our IT director to change all system passwords and access protocols. Security codes for the building were reset. I instructed our receptionist that my mother, Victor, and Connor were not to be admitted under any circumstances. I then called an emergency staff meeting to address the elephant in the room. Many of you witnessed an uncomfortable scene yesterday, I began, facing my concerned employees. I want to be transparent about what's happening. My family is making inappropriate demands regarding the company. I've refused these demands, and as a result, there may be some turbulence ahead. Lauren spoke up. We're behind you, Audrey. This company exists because of your vision and hard work. Nods and murmurs of agreement rippled through the room, bringing an unexpected lump to my throat. While my biological family was trying to undermine me, I realized I'd built a different kind of family here, one based on mutual respect and shared purpose. At precisely 10 a.m., as I predicted, they returned. From my office, I watched Melissa intercepting them at reception, her posture professional but firm as she informed them I was unavailable. Victor's face darkened. He pointed at my office, clearly visible through the glass walls, and demanded entrance. Melissa stood her ground as I'd instructed, pointing to the newly posted visitor policy requiring appointments. My phone rang, Melissa. They're insisting on seeing you. Security is on standby. I'll be right out, I replied, straightening my shoulders and taking a deep breath. In the reception area, Victor's charm had evaporated, revealing the calculating personality beneath. My mother looked between us anxiously, while Connor slouched against the wall, scrolling through his phone as if bored by the whole situation. Audrey, Victor began with forced pleasantness when he saw me. We're here to finalize our agreement. There is no agreement, I stated firmly. I've reviewed your proposal with my attorney. It has no legal merit, and I categorically reject it. Victor's facade cracked further. You're making a mistake. Family businesses thrive with proper leadership. This isn't a family business, I interrupted. It's my business, built without any support or contribution from any of you. My mother stepped forward. Audrey, be reasonable. Connor needs. What Connor needs isn't my responsibility, I said, finally voicing the truth I'd suppressed for years. I'm not sacrificing everything I've built because he doesn't want to build anything for himself. Connor looked up from his phone, suddenly interested. Hey, that's not fair. I have plans. Plans that involve taking what someone else created, I replied. That's not ambition, Connor. That's entitlement. Victor moved closer, lowering his voice to a threatening whisper. You don't want to make enemies of us, Audrey. I can destroy everything you've built. Something snapped inside me, the last thread of obligation that had kept me tethered to this toxic dynamic. Let me be perfectly clear, I said, loud enough for everyone in reception to hear. You are no longer welcome in this building or in my life. Any further attempts to contact me will be handled by my attorney. Any threats or defamatory statements will result in legal action. My mother's face crumpled. You can't cut off your family. After everything we've done for you. What exactly have you done for me? I asked, years of suppressed hurt surfacing. Name one thing you've sacrificed for my benefit. Her silence was deafening. That's what I thought. I continued. Now please leave before I have security escort you out. Victor's expression twisted with rage. You'll regret this. No one walks away from me. I just did, I replied, turning my back on them and walking toward my office. Melissa, please call security to ensure our visitors find the exit. Once inside my office, the adrenaline that had carried me through the confrontation began to fade, leaving me shaking. Lauren appeared with a cup of tea and closed the door behind her. That, she said with quiet admiration, was badass. I managed a weak smile. It doesn't feel badass. It feels terrible. Standing up for yourself against people who try to use you should feel good, she countered. But I get it. They're still your family. My phone began buzzing with texts and calls from my mother. I silenced it and placed it face down on my desk. Not anymore, I said quietly. Not like this. That evening, I returned to a voicemail inbox full of messages from my mother, each more tearful than the last. You're tearing this family apart, she sobbed in the final one. After everything I've sacrificed for you. The irony wasn't lost on me. For years, I'd been the one sacrificing my time, my money, my emotional well-being, trying to earn love that should have been freely given. No more. I drafted an email to Margaret outlining everything that had happened and forwarded the increasingly threatening texts from Victor. Then I did something I'd never allowed myself before. I turned off my phone, poured a glass of wine, and gave myself permission to grieve the family I'd wanted but never really had. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. But for the first time in my adult life, I was facing them without the weight of toxic family expectations. The next morning, I awakened to the notification light blinking on my phone. When I finally worked up the courage to check, I found dozens of missed calls, texts, and voicemails. But what truly made my stomach drop was the Facebook notification. 15 people had tagged me in posts. Connor had taken to social media with a vengeance, posting a carefully edited version of events that painted me as a ruthless businesswoman who had betrayed family loyalty for corporate greed. My mother had shared his post, adding her own heartbroken commentary about how success changed my daughter into someone I don't recognize anymore. The posts had already gathered sympathetic comments from extended family members and mutual friends who knew nothing about the actual situation. Distant cousins I hadn't spoken to in years were suddenly condemning my selfishness. Former high school classmates were expressing disappointment in how I'd forgotten my roots. My hands shook as I scrolled through the mounting public attack. This wasn't just family drama anymore. This was a calculated attempt to damage my reputation, both personally and professionally. I called Lauren. "Have you seen social media this morning?" "I was just about to call you," she replied grimly. "It's getting ugly. Victor's LinkedIn post about your company's financial troubles has already been viewed by several clients." My blood ran cold. What financial troubles? We're more profitable than ever. Exactly. It's complete fiction, but 3 clients have already called asking if their projects are secure. I took a deep breath, pushing down the panic rising in my chest. "I'm coming in. Call an emergency meeting with the leadership team for 9 a.m. By the time I reached the office, 2 more clients had called with concerns. The social media campaign had expanded, with Victor now suggesting that I had ethical issues in my business practices without specifying what those might be, a classic tactic to create suspicion without making actionable defamatory statements. The leadership team gathered in the conference room, faces tense with concern. "This is a coordinated attack," I began bluntly. "My family is retaliating because I refuse to hand over control of the company. They're spreading false information about our financial stability and my personal integrity." Jason, our finance director, shook his head. "The irony is we just had our best quarter ever. Which is why we need to address this head-on," I continued. "I've asked Margaret to join us to discuss legal options, but in the meantime, I want complete transparency with our clients and partners." We developed a crisis management plan. Personal calls to every client from their project manager, sharing our latest financial highlights and addressing concerns directly. A company-wide email clarifying the situation without delving into personal details. And most importantly, business as usual. The best refutation of false claims about instability was continued excellent performance. Margaret arrived as we were wrapping up. "I've reviewed everything," she said, setting her briefcase on the table. The social media posts and Victor's LinkedIn statements skirt the line of defamation, but they're carefully worded to avoid clear legal liability. "So there's nothing we can do?" I asked, disappointment evident in my voice. "I didn't say that," Margaret replied with a slight smile. "I've drafted cease and desist letters for all 3 of them. The letters outline potential legal consequences if they continue making false statements about you or the company." While the team implemented our response plan, I retreated to my office, the weight of the situation finally hitting me fully. My hands trembled as I tried to review client proposals. My chest felt tight, breathing becoming shallow and rapid. I recognized the symptoms, an anxiety attack, something I'd experienced during particularly stressful periods in building my business, but never with this intensity. I closed my eyes, forcing myself to take deep breaths, when my phone rang. It was Heather, my friend since college, and one of the few people who knew the full history with my family. "I just saw Connor's post," she said without preamble. "What a crock of manipulative garbage. Are you okay?" The simple question of genuine concern broke something in me. To my horror, I began sobbing, unable to form words through the release of tension. "I'm coming over," Heather stated rather than asked. "Cancel whatever you have this afternoon. You need perspective, wine, and someone who actually knows the truth." 2 hours later, we sat in my living room, takeout containers scattered across the coffee table. Heather had insisted I leave the office early, correctly assessing that I needed space to process. "You know this is classic narcissistic behavior, right?" Heather said, refilling our glasses. "They couldn't control you, so now they're trying to destroy your reputation." "It's working," I admitted. 2 clients have already postponed projects pending review of our partnership. "Temporarily," Heather emphasized. "The truth always emerges eventually. You need to take care of yourself through this storm." She was right, of course. I'd been so focused on the external threats that I'd neglected the personal toll this was taking. That night, I researched therapists specializing in family trauma and booked an appointment with Dr. Wallace for the following week. The next morning brought a new escalation. Extended family members began taking sides publicly. Uncle Robert, my mother's brother, posted a lengthy defense of her parenting, citing her sacrifices, without specifying what those might have been. Cousin Brittany shared childhood photos with captions lamenting how money changes people. But then something unexpected happened. My phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. "Audrey? This is Judith, your mother's sister." My Aunt Judith had been somewhat estranged from our family for years, appearing only at major holidays and occasionally sending birthday cards. "I've been watching this circus on Facebook," she continued, "and I couldn't stay silent any longer. There's something you need to know about Victor." My heart raced.
"I'm listening."
"This isn't the first time he's done this," Judith said gravely. "Before your mother, he was engaged to my friend Elaine. She owned a successful boutique. He gradually isolated her from friends, then pressured her to make his name a co-signer on business accounts for tax purposes. Within 6 months, he drained the accounts and disappeared." I sank into a chair, pieces clicking into place. "He's a con artist." "A very good one," Judith confirmed. "I tried to warn your mother when they started dating, but she accused me of jealousy. We haven't spoken since." "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. "Because I watched him destroy Elaine, and I can't be silent while he tries to do the same to you. And because someone needs to stand up for the truth in this family for once." After thanking Judith, I immediately called Margaret and relayed the information. "This changes things," she said thoughtfully. "With specific allegations of prior fraud, we have more to work with. I'd recommend hiring a private investigator to verify these claims and potentially uncover more." By the end of the week, I'd engaged Dennis Morgan, a former police detective turned PI. Meanwhile, the professional fallout continued. The local business community was buzzing with rumors. Former colleagues called asking if everything was okay. One potential investor pulled out of negotiations, citing concerns about leadership stability. Each night, I'd return home exhausted from maintaining a professional facade while my personal life imploded. Sleep became elusive, replaced by hours of staring at the ceiling, replaying years of interactions with my mother and wondering how I'd missed the signs. The social media attacks continued, but something unexpected began happening in the comments. People who had worked with me professionally started defending my character and business practices. Former clients posted about their positive experiences. Even a few distant relatives questioned the one-sided narrative being presented. The truth was beginning to emerge, but the question remained. How much damage would be done before it fully came to light? 3 weeks into what I'd begun mentally calling the family siege, Dennis Morgan requested a meeting. He arrived at my office carrying a thick manila folder, his expression suggesting he'd found something significant. "I've completed my preliminary investigation into Victor Morales," he began once we were seated in my office, blinds drawn for privacy. "What I found confirms your aunt's suspicions and goes considerably further." He opened the folder and spread several documents across my desk. Criminal records, newspaper clippings, and printouts of court cases created a damning portrait. "Victor has been convicted of fraud twice, both times with suspended sentences," Dennis explained, pointing to the official records. "His modus operandi is consistent. He targets successful single women, particularly those with their own businesses. He establishes trust, integrates himself into their lives, then leverages emotional manipulation to gain financial control." I stared at the evidence, a strange sense of validation washing over me. So, this was never about Connor's future. It was about gaining control of my company's assets. "Almost certainly," Dennis nodded. "But your half-brother and mother may not be willing conspirators. Based on the pattern, Victor likely convinced them they deserved a share of your success while planning to ultimately control everything himself." The revelation was both comforting and disturbing. On one hand, perhaps my mother wasn't deliberately trying to steal from me. On the other, She had been so easily manipulated into turning against her own daughter. There's more, Dennis continued, pulling out bank statements. I've documented unusual withdrawals from what appears to be your mother's savings account, nearly $50,000 over the past 6 months, all since Victor entered the picture. He's been stealing from her too, I whispered, the full picture becoming clearer. Classic con artist behavior, Dennis confirmed. They often extract smaller amounts from their primary mark while working toward the bigger score. Armed with this information, I contacted Margaret to develop our next steps. We agreed that confronting my mother with evidence of Victor's past might finally break his hold over her. But first, we needed to address the immediate business threats. The forgery attempt is particularly concerning, Margaret said after reviewing Dennis's findings. The PI had discovered that Victor had attempted to forge my signature on company documents submitted to the state business registry. Fortunately, the discrepancy had been flagged by a clerk who noticed it didn't match previous filings. That's criminal activity, I said, still processing the audacity. Exactly. We have grounds for a restraining order now, not just against Victor, but potentially all 3 of them given the coordinated nature of the harassment. The restraining order was granted 2 days later, following an incident where Victor appeared at my home late at night, pounding on the door and shouting threats until neighbors called police. The court ordered him to maintain a distance of at least 500 feet from me, my home, and my business premises. Meanwhile, our transparent communication strategy with clients began bearing fruit. Most clients who had expressed concerns returned once they saw our continued solid performance and forthright approach to addressing the rumors. The crisis even led to unexpected growth as our handling of the situation impressed several prospects who valued integrity and resilience. On a personal level, my weekly sessions with Dr. Wallace provided crucial support for processing the complex emotions surrounding my family's betrayal. What you're experiencing is a form of grief, she explained during one particularly difficult session. You're mourning the loss of the family relationship you thought you had, as well as the one you always hoped for. This framework helped me understand the waves of sadness that would hit unexpectedly, even as my resolve to protect myself strengthened. Establishing boundaries doesn't mean you failed at family, Dr. Wallace reassured me. It means you're succeeding at self-respect. 6 weeks into the ordeal, Aunt Judith called again. Your mother reached out to me, she said, her voice cautious. She's asking questions about Victor's past. I think the facade might be cracking. This news prompted me to take a calculated risk. After consulting with Margaret and Dr. Wallace, I decided to arrange a meeting with my mother, not at my home or office, but on neutral ground with Aunt Judith present as a mediator. We met at a private room in a downtown restaurant. My mother looked thinner than I remembered, dark circles under her eyes suggesting she wasn't sleeping well either. Judith sat between us, her presence a buffer against the emotional intensity. Thank you for coming, I began formally, struggling to keep my professional demeanor in place. My mother nodded, her eyes not quite meeting mine. Judith says you have information about Victor. I placed a folder on the table, copies of the most damning evidence Dennis had uncovered. Before we discuss that, I want to be clear. This meeting isn't about reconciliation. It's about providing you with information that affects your safety and financial security. She flinched at my businesslike tone but reached for the folder. These are criminal records, victim statements, and bank records, I explained as she began examining the documents. Victor has done this before to at least 3 other women. He identifies successful women, isolates them from support systems, then uses emotional manipulation to gain control of their assets. My mother's face paled as she turned pages, seeing the pattern emerge. When she reached the bank statements showing withdrawals from her own accounts, her hands began to tremble. I don't understand, she whispered. These are for my retirement savings. Victor said he was making investments for our future. He's been systematically draining your accounts, I said gently, my anger temporarily set aside in the face of her genuine shock. Just as he planned to do with my company, once he gained control. But Connor, she protested weakly. He said this was for Connor's future. Connor was the perfect pawn, Aunt Judith interjected. Victor used her desire to secure Connor's future as leverage to target Audrey's more valuable assets. My mother closed the folder, tears streaming down her face. I didn't know, Audrey. I thought we were building something for Connor. Victor said you had so much and weren't sharing. Would that justify trying to take my company? I asked, keeping my voice level. Even if Victor's intentions had been pure, which they clearly weren't, what made you think you had any right to what I built? She had no answer, and in her silence, I saw the first glimmer of genuine recognition of how deeply she had wronged me. Our conversation was interrupted by my phone ringing, Lauren. I almost declined the call, but something made me answer. Audrey, you need to come to the office now, Lauren said urgently. Connor is here. He's alone and says it's important. Leaving my mother with Aunt Judith to process the revelations, I drove to the office, unsure what new drama awaited. I found Connor sitting in the reception area, looking younger and more vulnerable than I'd seen him in years. Victor's gone, he blurted out as soon as I approached. He cleared out Mom's accounts yesterday and disappeared. She doesn't know yet. I found the transfer notifications on her email. The final piece of Victor's con was playing out exactly as Dennis had predicted. How much did he take? I asked. Everything, Connor replied, his voice breaking. And I helped him do it. He convinced me I deserved part of your company because Mom had always given you more attention than me. I almost laughed at the irony. Connor genuinely believed I had been the favored child. I was jealous of your success, he continued, looking down at his hands. And Victor knew exactly how to use that. But yesterday, I overheard him on the phone talking about taking the money and disappearing. That's when I realized he'd been using all of us. Connor's confession marked a turning point. The narrative Victor had constructed, of family entitlement and justified demands, was crumbling under the weight of his betrayal. The question now was whether anything could be salvaged from the wreckage of these relationships, and whether I even wanted to try. The news of Victor's final betrayal hit my mother with devastating force. When Connor and I arrived at her house to break the news, we found her already in tears, phone in hand. The bank called, she said hollowly. All the accounts are empty. Even my checking account. I felt a complicated mixture of vindication and pity. We need to file a police report immediately, I said, shifting into problem-solving mode. Dennis has compiled evidence of Victor's pattern of fraud that will help your case. My mother looked up, confusion crossing her tear-stained face. You'd help me? After everything? I'm helping because it's the right thing to do, I clarified. And because putting Victor behind bars protects other women from becoming his next victims. The following days were a blur of police statements, bank investigations, and discovering just how thoroughly Victor had integrated himself into my mother's financial life. Beyond emptying her accounts, he had opened credit cards in her name and taken out a second mortgage on her house, leaving her not just penniless, but deeply in debt. Aunt Judith moved in temporarily to provide emotional support, while I handled the practical and legal aspects of the crisis. Connor, seemingly shocked into maturity by the situation, took a job at a local restaurant to help with immediate expenses. Through it all, I maintained emotional distance. I arranged meetings with financial advisors, connected my mother with resources for fraud victims, and ensured she had legal representation, all while keeping our personal interactions minimal and focused on the tasks at hand. 2 weeks after Victor's disappearance, we received news that police had located him in Arizona, attempting the same scheme with a divorced restaurant owner he'd met online. The evidence Dennis had compiled proved crucial in securing his arrest and extradition. With Victor in custody and the immediate crisis stabilized, the time came for the conversation I'd been avoiding. My mother requested a meeting at her house, with Aunt Judith and Connor present. I need to apologize, she began when we were all seated in her living room. Not just for what happened with Victor, but for years before that. I remained silent, neither accepting nor rejecting the opening. When you were growing up, she continued, I was so focused on my own needs, finding security with Raymond, creating a new family, that I neglected you. Then when you became successful on your own, I felt entitled to that success because acknowledging your complete independence meant facing my failure as a mother. Connor shifted uncomfortably beside her. I need to apologize too. I was horrible at your company, and I never should have expected you to hand over something you built. Victor manipulated me, but I was an easy target because I was already jealous and entitled. Their words seemed sincere, but years of emotional manipulation had made me cautious. I appreciate you both acknowledging these things, I said carefully. But trust isn't rebuilt with one conversation. Actions matter more than words at this point. What can we do? My mother asked, a note of desperation in her voice. Give me space, I replied honestly. Respect my boundaries. Work on yourselves. I can't promise reconciliation, but those are the minimum requirements for me to even consider it. The meeting ended with no dramatic resolution, no tearful group hug, just a fragile understanding that the path forward, if there was one, would be long and uncertain. As Victor's case progressed through the legal system, more victims came forward, revealing the extent of his predatory pattern. My mother's testimony would eventually prove crucial in securing a substantial sentence, providing her a measure of closure and purpose amid the wreckage of her finances. Meanwhile, despite the personal turmoil, my business continued to thrive. The transparency with which we'd handled the crisis actually strengthened client relationships and attracted new partnerships. In a surprising development, we won a major contract with a client who cited our demonstrated resilience and integrity as deciding factors. During this period of professional success and personal reconstruction, I received an unexpected call from the editor of a local business journal. We've been following your company's growth with interest, the editor explained. Our annual Women Entrepreneurs issue is coming up, and we'd like to feature your story. Not just the business success, but how you navigated recent challenges while continuing to expand. My initial reaction was reluctance. The last thing I wanted was to publicly air family drama. But after consideration, I recognized an opportunity to control the narrative that had been weaponized against me. The resulting article, titled Building Success on Your Own Terms, focused on entrepreneurial resilience and the importance of boundaries in both business and personal life. Without naming names or detailing the specific family conflicts, it addressed the challenges of maintaining business integrity during personal crises. The piece resonated widely, bringing an influx of messages from other entrepreneurs who had faced similar family expectations and boundary violations. What had begun as a painful personal ordeal had transformed into a platform for discussing issues many faced but few discussed openly. 6 months after the confrontation in my office, the landscape of my life had transformed dramatically. New offices accommodated our expanding team. Victor awaited trial on multiple fraud charges. Connor had enrolled in community college classes, funding his education through his restaurant job rather than family handouts. My relationship with my mother remained complicated. We had occasional, carefully bounded interactions, coffee meetings in public places, brief phone calls limited to specific topics. Trust rebuilt slowly, if at all. But the toxic patterns had been broken, allowing space for something healthier to potentially emerge. One evening, as Lauren and I celebrated the completion of a major project, she raised her glass in a toast. To building something that's truly yours, she said with a knowing smile. I clinked my glass against hers, reflecting on the double meaning of her words. I had built not just a successful business, but a life defined by my own boundaries and values rather than others' expectations. To owning your worth, I replied, and never letting anyone take it from you. The journey had been painful, the losses real. But in protecting what I'd built, I had discovered a strength I never knew I possessed, the courage to stand alone when standing together meant compromising my integrity. Some family ties, I had learned, are worth fighting for. Others need to be severed to allow growth. The wisdom lies in knowing the difference and having the courage to act accordingly. What would you do if your family demanded you give up something you'd built from nothing? Let me know in the comments. This journey taught me that sometimes establishing boundaries isn't just self-protection, it's self-preservation. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life experiences. Share with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to protect what they've worked for. Thank you for coming along on this difficult but ultimately empowering journey with me, and I wish you the strength to honor your own worth in every relationship.